What if Bella became the beast's weakness? Dr. Loomis walked slowly down the halls of Smith's Grove Sanitarium where he'd spent most of his life working. Nodding towards the guards that unlocked his section of the sanitarium, he walked down the hall and opened the only empty room he had inside. Rodriguez. Have housekeeping up here immediately. This room needs to be thoroughly cleaned, new bed and bedding brought in and a desk. He told the guard that stood guard in that hall. Nodding, he radioed over the request before walking closer. You got a new patient coming, Doc? He asked, and Dr. Loomis nodded. Yeah, female. She'll have to go here. The doctor said it, and the guard snorted. Is that smart? Putting her next to the freak. He said, and Dr. Loomis shot him a disapproving look. You know it's not wise to antagonize him. I've told you that numerous times. You've no idea what he's capable of. The doctor said, walking past the guard and opening the door to Michael's room. As always, he was sitting at his desk making another paper mask and ignoring him completely. How are you today, Michael? The doctor asked as always, and as always got no answer. Well, I just wanted to let you know you'll be getting a neighbor next door, a girl. He said, and Michael's hand stopped moving as he tilted his head to the side and glanced to the side at the aging doctor. Taking that as a sign Michael wanted to know more, he smiled. Her name is Bella. She's coming from Washington. Her parents got concerned for her when she became severely depressed after her boyfriend left her suddenly. She attacked her mother and started screaming about vampires and wolves. I haven't assessed her yet, but she'll be here tomorrow. He told Michael, who gave one nod before turning back to his work. Sighing, Dr. Loomis left, shutting the door behind him and heading back to his office as he passed housekeeping coming to get Bella's room ready. Bella sat in the van, hands cuffed in front of her as they pulled up to her new home. She looked at it and sighed. How had her life become this in such a short amount of time? She knew the answer. The fucking Cullens, that's what. They had completely screwed up her life, and now her parents had abandoned her too. Given her to this place to deal with. Sliding out of the van, she walked next to two guards as she was led inside. Once they walked into the room and past security, she was met by an older man. Hello, Miss Swan. My name is Dr. Loomis and I will be your doctor, he said, holding out his hand. She narrowed her eyes at him and refused to shake his hand. Sighing, he motioned for the guards to uncuff her before grabbing her arm gently and pulling her through the door before it was locked back. Welcome to my wing here at Smith's Grove Sanitarium. This is the rec room. If you're good, you'll be allowed access for a few hours a day, he said, waving his arm in a sweeping motion. Bella just rolled her eyes before looking around. It was a fairly good-sized room with painted blue walls, a TV, some books and games, and a few couches and chairs. There in the corner of the room was a large man sitting by the window. He was wearing a face mask but had long hair past his shoulders hanging down. He was wearing the same blue scrubs she was wearing, and he was looking over towards them. He was sitting down, but Bella could tell he was very tall, over 6 feet she would guess, and a muscular build, and from what she could tell, dark eyes. Pulling her down the hall, Bella smiled over at the man before ducking her head down and letting the doctor pull her down the hall. This is your room here. You only have one neighbor, as I only have one other patient. His name is Michael Myers. He was sitting out in the rec rooms. He's been here since he was 10. I would implore you not to bother him. He is very dangerous, Dr. Loomis told her, and she just ignored him as she looked around the room. It wasn't much. Small full-size bed in the corner, blue sheets and blankets, and a white desk by the door, and a small window that let in very little light. It looked like a fancy prison cell to her. I'm good with danger, she mumbled, thinking about everything she'd been through with the Cullens. She knew these people didn't believe her and wanted to make her think she had gone crazy, but Bella knew the truth. The cold bite mark on her arm reminded her every day. Ah yes, the vampires and wolves you've been talking about. Tell me why you feel they are real? He asked her, and she just glared at him. She was done talking to assholes like him about the truth. They didn't want to believe her, and that was fine with her. Would you like to rest or go out into the rec area before dinner? He asked, and she shrugged. He waved her with him as he pulled her back out and into the rec area where Michael was still sitting staring out the window. Remember what I said. There is a guard over there if you need anything. he said before walking through the locked door and into his office. What an idiot. She mumbled and she saw Michael's head tilt, but he said nothing or gave of any indication he knew she was there. She walked around the room for a moment, ignoring the guard's lingering looks on her as she shifted through the magazines before walking over towards the books that were behind Michael near the only window in the room. "Excuse me. Do you mind if I get a book?" she asked, and he tilted his head to look at her as she walked closer. No one ever came near him, so it shocked him she didn't seem scared of him like everyone else did. She looked at her for a moment before shrugging. Nodding, she walked past him and bent down to run her fingers over the book titles before pulling one from the shelf. Michael took a deep breath. She smelled amazing and was very pretty. He'd seen plenty of women come and go, some that worked there and some that visited with patients. He seemed even more watching the people come and go from the hospital across the street, but this girl, this new patient, was by far the prettiest he'd ever seen. She was a classic beauty and needed no enhancements girls tended to use. She had hurt and anger in her eyes, and Michael could relate to that. Walking by, she bit her lip as she peeked over at him, then to the chair that sat across from him and overlooked the window. "May I?" she asked, pointing to the chair. No one ever asked him anything before they did it, and it threw him for a moment before he gave one nod. Smiling, she slid past him and brushed against his shoulder to get by. He tensed for a moment. He didn't like to be touched, but for some reason her touch didn't leave him feeling angry like it normally did. It'd make him feel something else, something new. "I'm Isabella Swan, but everyone calls me Bella." "You Michael, right?" she asked, and he gave another nod. "Nice to meet you. I guess we're neighbors now," she said before opening her book and pulling her legs up into the chair with her. They sat in silence after that, which was glad. He hadn't talked in years to anyone, and though she didn't seem to mind talking to him, she wasn't one that needed to fill the quiet with endless chatter and was content to just read and occasionally looked out the window or toss a glare at the guard that couldn't take his eyes off her. Michael watched her the whole time they sat there as he tried to figure out why she was the first person he'd ever met that he didn't feel the urge to kill. Everyone else he could and would gladly kill with no issues. This girl threw. Something made her exempt from those thoughts, and it baffled him. When dinner came around, they were ordered back to their room, and Bella sighed but stood anyways. "Right this way, baby," the guard said, and Bella jerked back from him with narrowed eyes as Michael stood as well. "Back off, asshole." "I'm not interested," she hissed before storming away back towards her room. Michael's glare at the guard was harsher than normal as he followed and went back to his room. As the door shot them inside, he sat on his bed and ate quietly to himself as he listened to the girl move around next door. "Fucking pervert," he heard her mumble, and he cracked a smile as she mumbled to herself as she ate. Later that night he woke to her loud gasp as she sat up in her bed. He laid there and listened as she silently cried for a few moments. "God, why won't you leave me alone?" she whispered before sitting up in the bed. He could hear the blankets pull back as she sat up against the wall. She hummed to herself for a while after, and Michael just laid there and listened before falling back to sleep, listening to her gentle hums. The next day Bella went back to the rec room when they opened her door and took a seat on the same chair as before to continue to read. A few moments later Michael dropped down into the chair next to her. When she felt a thump against the front of her book, she looked over to see Michael looking at her with those blue eyes that held and said so much. "Hello, Michael. Are you okay today?" she asked him, and he gave a nod and poked the book again. "Oh, this. Do you want it?" she asked, handing it to him, and he shook his head and pushed it back towards her and pointed towards the book, tilting his head to the side. "Oh, it's called Wuthering Heights. Used to be one of my favorites. It's an older book. I've read it 100 times. It's a book by Emily Bronte about this strange family from a long time ago that brings in an orphan to live with them. It's a lot of drama with a little love in the mix," she said, and he nodded. "Do you want me to read it to you?" she asked, and he gave one nod. Smiling, she flipped back to the front of the book and began to read until Loomis came out to get her for their session. "I got to go sit with Dr. Nosey. Here, keep this and I'll continue when I get back, okay?" she said, folding the corner of the book and sitting it in Michael's lap. He gave another nod and held it in his hands as she stood and walked over towards Loomis, who had been watching them. Michael narrowed his eyes as the guard's eyes followed Bella across the room, and Bella just shot him the bird, and Michael cracked a smile. When she was done, it was Michael's turn with the doctor, and he handed her back the book as he went, and she promised not to read it without him. After an hour of ignoring everything the doctor was asking, he was finally able to leave and head back outside, where Bella was sitting on one of the couch flipping through a magazine. She smiled at him as he walked over and sat on the couch in the middle as she folded her legs up so he could sit. She picked up the book and started where they left off. Loomis watched them the last 2 days since she arrived, and it seemed for some reason Michael was changing around her. He still held that same evil inside him he always had, but with Bella it seemed that evil didn't apply to her. In all the many years Michael had been there, he'd never allowed anyone to get that close to him or communicated to anyone once he stopped talking after his mother died. No one could get through to him except this new patient, Bella. Michael listened as Bella's words flowed over him as she read, blushing as she read some of the more adult themes in the book, and he cracked a smile at that. Looking down, he saw her feet sitting next to him on the couch as she had kicked off her shoes. She was folded up on one side of the couch as he took up the rest, and he could see her toes flexing in an effort to get comfortable. He ran one of his fingers over her bare foot. She paused in her reading for a moment before picking back up as he continued to play with her foot. She chuckled when he hit a ticklish spot, and he tilted his head to the side before moving somewhere else. Then he picked up both her feet and laid them in his lap, running his fingers over the skin on her feet and ankle. She relaxed against him and read as they stayed in their own little world, ignoring everyone watching around them. Later that night, when she woke again to bad dreams, he tapped on the vent on the wall and she gasped before tapping back. "Michael, is that you?" she asked, and he tapped it again and she sighed. "I'm so sorry for waking you up. I'll try to be quieter, I didn't know you could hear me," she said, and he shook his head but tapped the vent again. "How about this? Tap once for yes and 2 for no. Will that work?" she asked, and he tapped once. "Did I wake you up?" she asked, and he tapped once again. "I'm sorry. Are you upset with me?" she asked, and he tapped twice for no. "Okay, good. Does my talking bother you?" she asked, and he tapped twice again for no. "Okay, do you want me to keep talking?" she asked, and he tapped once for yes. "Want to know what I did to get here?" she asked, and he tapped once again. "Well, it's kinda a long story, so let me see. It started when I was 17. I was living with my mother in Arizona, and she was getting remarried to this baseball player. She'd always liked men that could take care of her, and I was glad I didn't have to do it anymore, to be honest. Anyways, I went to live with my father in Forks, Washington, where I was originally born. My father is a lot like me, I guess, or maybe I'm a lot like him. We're both pretty quiet people, so I didn't have to entertain him like I did my mom, so that was a nice change. When I moved there and started school, I met this family. They were different. Unusually beautiful, all with pale skin and golden eyes. There were 6 of them and only one was single. Edward. The whole school knew them as the weird family and told me not to bother talking to them because they only talked to each other. Edward was in my biology class and I had to sit next to him. I noticed his eyes changed to black when I sat down, and he became very tense and wouldn't speak to me. As soon as the bell rang, he bolted from the class and was gone for like 2 weeks. She said, stopping to take a breath, "Are you still awake, Michael?" she asked, and he tapped the vent once for yes. "Okay, good. I promise you what I'm about to tell you is the absolute truth. Even if no one else believes me." Anyways, Edward came back and started finally talking to me. There was just something about him that I was drawn to, and I couldn't stop myself from wanting to know more. Once day, a van in the parking lot at the school slid on the ice and head right for me as I was standing by my truck. I looked up and waited for the impact when Edward appeared out of nowhere, pushed me away from the van and pushed the van back with his hands. After that, I knew he was something not human, and I was determined to find out what it was. I tried to find out by asking him questions, but he made it seem like I was nuts and didn't see anything. Then I went to the local reservation and talked to an old friend there named Jacob. My dad and his dad are best friends. He told me this legend of Cold Ones and how his people were descended from wolves to protect their lands from the Cold Ones. I started doing research and finally figured it out. He and his family were vampires, and I was never scared of them. When he saved me again from almost being gang raped, I confronted him about it, and he confirmed my suspicions and told me I was the only mind he couldn't read. He and 2 of his family members had extra gifts when they were turned. His was reading minds, and I was puzzling to him. So we started dating, if you could call it that. He would barely kiss me in fear of hurting me because my blood called to him so much. She said, and he laid on his bed and listened to her story. I met his family and was brought in like I belonged there. They all loved me, or so I thought, all except Rose. She never cared for me much, and the feeling was mutual. She was a bitch, Bella said, and Michael chuckled. Anyways, one night they took me to play vampire baseball, and we ran across 3 nomad red-eyed vampires. See, the type of blood the vampire drinks determines the eye color. The Cullens only drank from animals, so theirs was gold. Human blood drinks have bright red eyes, and black means angry or hungry. They are also made of stone and ice cold. No fangs, but their venom is what can turn you, and you have to survive 3 days of burning to be turned. Anyways, one of the male nomads, James, caught my scent and wanted me for a snack, and Edward read in his mind that he was a tracker and wouldn't stop until he got me. It was a game to him. So Alice and Jasper, Edward's siblings, ran with me back to Arizona while the others tried to hunt down James and his mate. But James was smarter than them and found me. Called me and made me think he had my mother hostage, so I gave my babysitters the slip and ran to save my mom. When I got there, I saw it was a trap, and James beat me up really bad and bit me. I felt the burning pain as the venom worked through my bloodstream. Edward and the others came and killed James, and Edward sucked the venom from me because he didn't want me to be turned. After that, they made a good excuse for my parents as to why I ran away and got hurt, and I healed up after a few months. Then on my 18th birthday, Alice gave me a birthday party at their house even after I asked them not to. I cut my finger opening a gift, and Jasper, who is an empath, snapped and tried to attack me in bloodlust. Edward shoved me across the room, and I cut my arm on a broken vase as they finally got Jasper out of the house. Carlisle, the coven leader, and a doctor stitched me up and sent me home. The next morning, Edward took me to the woods. She said before taking a deep breath. He told me that his family had left, and he was leaving too. That I was not coming with them, and that it was time for them to move on. That I was not good enough to be a Cullen, and I was only a distraction for them to play with, and that my human memories would fade over time, and that they needed to move on to their next distraction. Then he kissed my head and left me crying on the ground for hours before someone found me and took me back home. I was a zombie after that. I just completely shut down, like I was going through withdrawals. I barely ran on autopilot, and I woke up screaming every night from memories of that night. My father latterly had to hand feed me on days I just didn't bother to eat. Then I find out Jacob, who had started getting me to come around, left me too because he turned into a wolf because of the vampires that kept coming to the area, and that James's mate is still out there trying to get around the wolves to kill me. When my mother flew in because my father called her to come help me, I lost it when she demanded I snap out of this childish shit and grow up. Bella said, snorting. I completely lost it. I screamed and wrapped my hands around her throat and tried like hell to choke her out. All the anger in me from being betrayed twice after being put through hell just came out, and I snapped. I started screaming about vampire and wolves and how it was not my fault, and my father thought I had gone nuts. He cuffed me and took me to the hospital, where they decided I was suffering with an extreme form of delusion and depression and was a danger to everyone around me, and now here I am. She said before finally finishing her tale. Do you believe me? She asked, and he tapped once for yes. He knew without a doubt she was telling the truth. There was no lie in her voice, and it amazed him that the world held a lot more out there than he had thought. Thank you. I still have the scars and cold bite mark to prove it, but I didn't mean to spill it that day. I know it's dangerous for me to know about them. It's a big rule for their kind. They have to keep the secret, and if the vampire rulers knew, I knew they'd have me killed, but I was so fucking pissed that day I just didn't give a shit, and now I really don't give a fuck. They ruined my life, and all I feel now is anger and pain. She said, and he tapped the vent again, letting her know he understood and he believed her. You even threw about leaving this place, Michael? She asked, and he tapped once for yes. I know you've been here a while and maybe one day you'll tell me about it, but I just wondered if you ever thought about it. If you do leave, take me with you. She said, and he tapped once for yes again. The days that followed after that showed the two were now inseparable. They sat together closely every day as Bella either read to him or just talked, and he nodded along with anything she asked him. Dr. Loomis couldn't believe what he was seeing. Neither one of them would tell him anything in their sessions, but it seemed they created this very unique and strong bond, and Loomis knew Bella was Michael's piece, and if anything were to happen to her they would see rage like they'd never seen from him before, because that evil in him, it was still very much there. But Loomis didn't think he could hurt Bella, but she was the only one safe in this world. Bella smiled as Michael played with a lock of her hair. She was sitting on the couch again with her feet in his lap. Once of his hands on her feet, but the other ventured up to roll a piece of hair around his fingers as she read from another book. She liked it when he touched her, and she liked that he would only allow her to willingly touch him and not get mad. "I'm 19 tomorrow. It's my birthday," she told him as she smiled over at him. He tilted his head to look at her, and she saw him crack a smile as he nodded. He used his strength and pulled her legs towards him until her knees draped over his lap, and she was able to comfortably lay her head on his shoulder as he held her firmly against him. She felt absolutely comfortable in his arms and wished it could happen more often. She continued to read as he played with more of her hair, and she ignored the shitty place they were in. With Michael it was bearable. The next day Michael came out of his room and waited for hers to open. She smiled when she saw him as he handed her something wrapped in paper. "For me?" she asked, taking it, and he nodded, glaring at the guard that waited for them in the hall. She opened it and gasped. Inside he had made her a half mask. Pink and purple. She smiled and tried it on before taking it and sitting it on her pillow. Walking back over, she hugged Michael tightly. "I love it, thank you, Michael," she said, and he wrapped his large arms around her and hugged her back before bending down and whispering in her ear for the first time, "Happy birthday," causing her to gasp and smiling widely at him. He spoke for the first time in years, but only for her. Bella loved the sound of his voice. Even though he only said 2 words to her, it was enough, and it had sent shivers down her spine. It was deep and husky from not using it for years. She didn't know why he stopped talking, but she was glad he at least would break his silence just to tell her happy birthday. It meant more than any present she could have gotten. Not that she didn't absolutely adore the mask too. But the words meant a lot. They spent the day of her birthday sitting on the couch again. Michael had moved the chairs away from the window, and with a glare to the guard who tried to stop him, moved the couch over and sat it in front and facing the window. It looked off as the back of the couch was facing the doors, but Michael didn't give a shit. He knew Bella liked looking out the window, and so did he, and today they were going to sit and ignore everyone around them. Not that they didn't do that every day, but still he wanted it clear he didn't want anyone bothering them. Dr. Loomis got the message when he came out of his office to call Bella inside, but was stopped short by the dark glare sent over the top of the couch by Michael. It sent chills down the doctor's spine, and he nodded in understanding before going back to his office. He would wait till the next day, as it appeared Michael was not feeling up to sharing his time with Bella that day, and Dr. Loomis knew better than anyone what Michael was capable of. Being behind these walls did nothing to diminish the danger he possessed, and the doctor knew it was only a matter of time before he got tired of the walls and decided it was time to kill again. He knew it was stupid to allow this bond between Bella and Michael to continue, but he also knew if they had any hopes of keeping Michael somewhat sane enough to not kill again, Bella might be the key. Oh, how wrong he would be. Bella spent the day reading like always as they sat close together on the couch. He played with a strand on her hair and her feet like always. After lunch she started getting a headache and took to massaging her forehead with her fingers. When she winced and stopped reading for a moment, Michael stopped playing with her hair and tilted his head to the side. She ignored it for a moment as she rubbed her temples, and she didn't stop until she felt his finger on her chin. When he tilted her head up, she chuckled. "Sorry, I got a headache. I don't sleep well, and I guess it's catching up with me. Plus I refuse to take that medicine they leave in my room," she said, wrinkling her nose at the thought. He nodded before picking her up. She gasped at how strong he was. He moved her around as if she weighed nothing as he arranged her until she was lying on the couch with her head in his lap. She smiled up at him before closing her eyes with a pleased groan as his strong hands started massaging her head and running his fingers through her hair. She was in heaven and was out instantly. Michael let her nap as he sat with her head in his lap. He just watched the people outside as he played with her hair. He felt more content and relaxed in that moment than he could ever remember being, and it was a feeling he enjoyed. He'd never been attached to anyone other than his little baby sister Angel that he referred to as Boo, and never had the desire to with a woman. But Bella was quickly becoming to mean way more to him than his sister ever did. It was like he was addicted to her very presence. So far life in the sanitarium wasn't all that bad to Bella. Sure, she'd rather be out on her own making her own decisions, but she was attached to Michael now. With an attachment stronger than she ever had with Edward, and it scared and excited her all at once. Her dreams weren't about wanting Edward back anymore. They were more about her past brush with James or Edward coming back and taking her from Michael that woke her at night. Some were Victoria finding her and torturing her, but she no longer longed for Edward or the Cullens. No, she longed for something far more dangerous. "Miss Swan, you have a visitor." She heard Dr. Loomis call out as he entered the rec room. It was a week after her birthday, and she and Michael were at their normal spot on the couch, still facing the window, as no one had the balls to move it when she heard her name. Stopping her reading in her hand that was playing with the ends of Michael's hair this time, she looked over the back of the couch as Michael stopped running his hand over her ankle at her name. "Say what now?" she asked, confused, before he turned and waved someone over. Bella narrowed her eyes. "Jake. What the hell are you doing here?" she asked at the tall native that smiled at her like they were still friends. "We need to talk, Bella," he said, and she sighed before handing Michael the book. He tensed as she moved, but she patted his muscular chest as she stood and followed Jake and the doctor to a small meeting table in the corner of the room. When she sat, she saw Michael stand and take a seat in one of the chairs facing them and watch intently. Jake tensed as he saw the size of the man Bella had been sitting with as he sat across from his old friend. "Who is that?" Jake asked, jabbing his thumb back at Michael. Bella rolled her eyes as the doctor left them to talk and walked back towards his office. "That's really none of your business anymore, Jake," she said, and Jake sighed before reaching across the table and grabbing Bella's hand. She tensed and saw Michael's body tense so hard he jerked as she moved her hand away from him and glared at him as she crossed her arms. "Don't touch me," she hissed, and his face fell. "Bella, I hate seeing you here," he told her, and she scoffed. "You didn't mind it when you watched them cart me off here, Jacob," she said to him. "You know I couldn't tell them the truth. You shouldn't have said anything to begin with," he told her, and she rolled her eyes. "Really, it was an accident, and I'm fucking tired of having to keep everyone's secret when I just get screwed in the end," she told him. "You shouldn't have gotten involved with them, Bella. None of this would have happened," he told her, and she snorted. "No shit, Sherlock, but it's not like I had a choice. I was a victim to their lure and charms. No human could resist that, and I honestly thought we were in love. I know different now," she told him, and he nodded. "You didn't have to try and kill Renee through," he said, and she slapped her hand on the table and pointed at him. "That's rich coming from you, pup. Don't look down on me when I was provoked. Trust me, if I could have gotten my hands on you or the Cullens, I would have. Now why the fuck are you here?" he hissed through her teeth. Michael's fists were clenched so tight she threw the bones in his hands would break. The madder and upset she got, the less he had control on his anger. Jake sighed heavily as he slumped in his chair. He didn't want to tell her this. "I came to tell you. Well, Charlie was killed 4 days ago," he said, and Bella's mouth dropped open in shock and she reeled back like he'd slapped her. "What?" she yelled, and that brought Dr. Loomis out of his office to stand behind the bars to watch. He could see whatever this young man said had pissed Bella off. "Calm down," Jake said, and she growled at him. "Don't fucking tell me to calm down, Jacob Black. 4 fucking day. You waited 4 days to tell me my father is dead?" She spat as tears started to fall down her face, and if anyone was looking, they'd see Michael's eyes had darkened to a dangerous shape as Belle got upset. "I wanted to tell you right away, but I didn't think it was something I could say over the phone, and Dad wanted to bury him right away. We just lost Harry too, so everyone was upset," Jake told her. What happened? She asked. We were chasing the redhead through the woods, but she got through us and went to your house. Charlie was coming back from a late shift when he saw her. He just stood there and stared and mumbled Bella was right. I chased her off and phased and told him to wait for me, then took off after her again. We got her and killed her, but Charlie flipped out. Got in his car and was racing towards the res. We assumed to talk to Dad, but he never made it. A car with 4 drunks you went to school with hit the side of his chair and ran him into a tree. He died on impact and the others just had bad injuries. I'm so sorry, Bella. He said with deep sadness as a broken look fell across Bella's face. She sat there for a moment, running everything he just said over in her head. Who hit him? She hissed out. I don't think. He said before she stopped him. Don't even fucking tell me you don't think it's important. You tell me right the fuck now who hit my father. She said, and Jake sighed. That marshmallow we went to the movies with that night. Mike or something. Him, another guy, and 2 girls. I don't know their names, it's in the paper if you look it up. They were all given fines and community service because of who their parents are. Jake said, and Bella lost it. She yelled out in rage, flew over top of the table and attacked Jake. Both he and his chair hit the ground here as he tried to pull Bella off him. She hit him over and over, not caring it wasn't hurting him at all, as she screamed and cried before finally scratching her nails down his face. You were supposed to keep him safe. You didn't do your fucking job. She screamed over and over. Dr. Loomis and the guards all ran towards the door and started getting it unlocked as they tried to yell for Bella to stop. What the fuck, Bella? Jake yelled as he finally shoved her off him as he went to stand, but a hand at his throat stopped him and picked him up off the before he could move towards her. No one saw Michael move when Bella lost it. He saw it in her eyes she was going to snap, and he didn't care that she did. Actually wanted to see her kill the boy. It made him feel lust and desire like he'd never felt before. He moved because he knew the guards would attack her and that he wouldn't allow. He picked that fucking boy up off the floor by his neck. He could tell he was more than human and probably one of those wolves if he remembered the names right that Bella told him about, but he didn't really give a shit. He wouldn't expose himself there in front of everyone, so Michael picked him up off the ground and squeezed his neck as hard as he could and glared at him as he reached his other hand down towards Bella, who was crying on the ground, and laid his hand on the top of her head. Jake was absolutely shocked that this human was able to do harm to him like this, and even if he could get away he would have to use his abilities, and he couldn't do that. What scared him the most was the look in the man's eyes. He looked like a nightmare come true. Like the devil was staring into his soul and promising pain, and Jake actually felt real fear just from his eyes. Michael, drop him. They heard as the doctor and guards came in finally. Michael tilted his head to the side and tossed the boy at the doctor's feet as Bella grabbed his hand and he pulled her up. He hissed at the guards that moved towards him, but Loomis stopped them from moving as they watched Michael pick Bella up into his arms. She gripped his scrub top in her hands and he cradled her to his chest and walked them back over to the couch, sitting down and holding Bella in his lap as she cried. No one go near them right now. Loomis ordered as Jake stood from the ground massaging his neck as he watched his once best friend cry into the chest of a very large man in a mask that looked to be the devil himself, and Jake knew he had lost Bella forever. That news should have been ran by me first. This has set her back a lot. The doctor said, turning towards the young man, who nodded sadly. Who is that man? Jake asked as the Dr. Loomis escorted him outside the rec room and locked the door back. Who he is not something I can discuss with anyone. All you need to know is he is very dangerous to everyone except Bella, and you have personally pissed him off, which is never a good thing. I suggest you take your leave back home and stay there. Dr. Loomis told him. Jake nodded before bowing his head in sadness and heading back to the airport to go home. He shouldn't have come. The Bella he knew and loved was long gone. I can't believe he's dead. Bella said sadly as she cried into Michael's chest. He held her tightly, running his hand, not holding her, over her hair and back. It was wreaking havoc on his body and emotions. The more upset she became, the more he wanted to kill someone to make it better. He'd never felt rage like this since he killed his mother's boyfriend and older sister, and even then he didn't think he had been this pissed off. He wanted her to smile again and he really wanted to get that boy for ever upsetting her. "It's okay. I got you," he whispered in her ear. She nodded as she clung to him harder as she cried. He knew her father meant something to her, her mother not so much, but her father was different. She may have been mad that he put her here, but Bella cared about her father, and to know the only family she had left that she cared for was now gone tore something inside her, and that tore something inside Michael. "I want them dead for killing Charlie," she whispered, and he nodded as he kissed the side of her head. He'd gladly make that happen one day soon. He had come to terms a while ago that he was feeling very protective and possessive towards Bella, and to him she was his, and he'd fuck anyone up that upset her. There'd be hell to pay if anyone actually hurt her. He'd make them beg for death, and one day he'd kill those 4 pricks that killed her father for her. He'd give her anything she wanted, kill anyone she wanted. All she had to do was ask. The devil had found his bride, and the world would burn before he ever let someone take her from him. "Miss Swan, would you like to talk about what happened yesterday?" Dr. Loomis asked her the next morning during their session. Michael had held her until he had no choice but to carry her to her room when curfew came around. He laid her on the bed and reluctantly went to his. She lay there all night just staring at mask hanging on her wall before she eventually went to sleep, dreams of her father's death plaguing her. "Not really," Bella said, sitting in the chair staring at the picture hanging behind his head. She really just wanted to go sit with Michael. "Your friend Jacob told you your father passed away? How did that make you feel?" he asked, and she snorted. "How do you think?" She replied, "I think you were upset. Rightfully so. But violence and blaming him for not keeping your father safe is not fair, don't you think?" he said, and she scoffed. "You wouldn't understand." "Can I go now?" she asked, and he sighed. "You and Michael are getting close." "Tell me about that," he said, and she shrugged. "We just understand each other," she said, and Dr. Loomis looked at the girl in front of him for a while before sighing. "All right, you can go," he said, and she was out of the door before he could finish the sentence. Bella went back into the rec room and sat by Michael, who was waiting for her. She snuggled down against him and sighed as she picked up their book and started reading again. She needed to get out of this funk. Later that night, everything changed. Bella was sleeping and she didn't hear the door to her room open quietly, nor did she know of the man in her room until a hand was pressed to her mouth. Her eyes opened wide and she gasped as she saw the guard Rodriguez standing over her with his finger to his mouth and his other hand over her mouth, preventing her from screaming. "Now stay quiet. It's time to show you what a real man is instead of that freak you hang around with," he whispered quietly to her before climbing into the bed and straddling her waist with his. She saw them. His shirt was unbuttoned, as was his pants, and he pulled rope out of his pocket. She started to trash around then, but the large hand on her mouth was holding her down so hard she couldn't move and she couldn't breathe. He tied the rope to the bed and yanked one of her arms up before fighting with her to get it wrapped around her wrist before doing the same with the other one. Then he let go of her mouth and she gasped for air as he secured her hands. "Stop. Help me." "No." She started to scream and he slapped her hard across the face, causing her to grunt in pain. She heard a scream from next door and the guard laughed. "That's right, freak. Listen while I make your girl scream and show her what a man can do." He yelled into the wall and Bella could smell a faint hint of alcohol on the man's breath. She fought hard, so hard she felt the ropes cutting into her hands as she tried to get him off her. She could hear Michael in the next room, screaming and yelling in rage, growling as she tried to kick through the wall or the door, she wasn't sure which. "Time for fun," he said, holding a small pocket knife to her face and clicking it open. She gasped as tears rolled down her face and fear slammed into her heart. She did not want him to touch her. He used the knife to slice down her scrub top, nicking her stomach as he went before he sat it on the desk by the bed and ran his hands over her chest, gripping her breast hard and causing her to scream out in pain. He leaned forward and tried to kiss her, but she turned her head as she continued to try and buck him off her, but he weighed too much and she couldn't get her hands free no matter how hard she pulled. He wasn't deterred though and moved his kisses to her neck and chest, biting and laughing when she jumped every time she felt his teeth. She could hear the alarms going off outside and the guard groaned in annoyance. "Looks like we're going to have to hurry." he told her before going for her pants. That's when they both heard a loud crash and growl before Bella saw Michael in the doorway. He stood there taking in the scene for only a moment before he lost it. He grabbed the guard by the neck before he could go for his knife and yanked him off Bella hard, snapping his arm in half when he tried to punch Michael. Michael slammed him into the wall before taking the knife and slicing the guard from navel to sternum, then proceeded to stab him over and over again before slicing through his neck and tossing him out of the room just as Dr. Loomis and 3 other guards came inside. "Oh my God! What happened?" Loomis asked as he eyed the dying guard who was gasping for air. Michael ignored them all as he tossed the knife down and yanked the blanket off Bella's bed and draped it over her exposed chest. She was crying hysterically at that point, and Loomis knew what happened them. He saw Michael's door busted open, saw Bella tied to the bed and the dead guard with his clothes half removed, and he knew what that man tried to do to Bella and knew why Michael reacted the way he did. Michael whipped the blood off his hands with her sheets before tossing them away and yanking the ropes off the bed. She frankly removed them before sitting up and wrapping her arms around Michael. He touched her cheek with one hand and tilted her head to see the bruise already forming from the slap he heard, and he growled in anger as he pulled her against him. He was shaking in rage. "Michael, can we look at Bella? Make sure she's okay?" Dr. Loomis asked as he finally decided to try and check on Bella. Michael tensed before letting her go and turning, hiding her body from their sight, and hissed at them, making them all jump. Dr. Loomis held both hands up. "I mean her no harm, you know that," he told Michael, who jabbed his finger at the dead guard on the floor, and Dr. Loomis sighed. "I know. He shouldn't have done what he did, and you've taken care of him now. Bella, please tell him to let the nurse check you over." He tried to get Bella on his side. "Screw you," she mumbled from where her face was pressed into Michael's back, and Loomis sighed, knowing they weren't getting anywhere close to her tonight. Michael turned again and wrapped the blanket around her body and lifted her up into his arms and grabbed her mask he made off the wall and carried her into the hall. Dr. Loomis and the others backed away at the glare in his eyes. He was not in the mood for anything right now. Moving to his room, he took her inside and slammed the broken door shut. It bounced off the wall as the lock was now completely busted and wouldn't latch, but it still gave off the impression he wanted it to. If anyone went in there right now, they would die painfully. "Let's leave them for now. Remove this body and clean up all the blood. Replace the bedding in her room as well. I want no evidence this ever happened left for them to see in the morning, or we'll never get him to let her out of that room," Loomis ordered, and they all nodded. Michael carried her over to his queen-size bed and sat her down. He then went over to the shelf and took 2 new scrub tops of his. His pants were fine, but he had blood on his top. Stripping his off first, he changed and tossed the bloody shirt to the floor and washing his hands quickly in the small sink that had been installed for him years ago after always making a mess with his mask, before walking back over it and bending down to look at Bella better. He ran his now clean hand over her cheek, and she looked up at him and took the shirt he offered her. She let the blanket fall from her body, and Michael ran his eyes over her, glaring at the cut on her stomach. Cleaned the blood off with a blanket before she put the shirt on and saw it was already scabbing up, and nodded before he let her dress. Once she was covered in his overly large shirt, he checked her wrist. They would need to be cleaned and dressed, but it could wait till Bella was claimed, and he wasn't in a rage to kill someone. When he had been woken up to her screams, he felt like his heart had been ripped from his chest, and he was pissed. He knew what was happening next door, and he immediately started kicking the door in. It took a lot since it was a metal door, but every scream from Bella and plea for help made the next kick that much stronger, and after a few minutes he was finally free and out for vengeance. "Come," he said, and picked her back up when she nodded. He laid her on the bed before climbing in behind her so he could see the door, and wrapped both arms around her and pulled her into his body. She clung to him as she shivered and tried to stop the tears that fell. He was tired of seeing tears from her eyes and decided right then things were about to change soon. They were not staying there much longer. "Thank you for saving me," she whispered, and he nodded and kissed her forehead before pulling her tighter against him and covering them both up with his blanket. She was out not long after that as the event finally caught up with her. Michael did not sleep the rest of the night. He glared at the door, plans forming in his mind as he breathed in her sweet-smelling hair all night. He would keep her safe from now on, he vowed that to himself. Michael allowed one female nurse to come into the room the next day and look Bella over and wrap up her wrist. After that he growled at the women who ran from the room in fear. Bella sat in his bed against the wall and watched Michael pace his small room, like he was just waiting for something to happen. Dr. Loomis knew trying to force them out of the room would be deadly right now, so all their meals were left by the door for them to retrieve and eat when they wanted, and they were left alone all night while he dealt with the police on what happened to the now-dead guard. "Michael, are you mad at me?" Bella asked him after lunch when he had yet to sit down. He just kept pulling things off the walls in his room and either ripping them up or putting a few things into a backpack. When she asked that, his head snapped up and he looked at her before shaking his head rapidly. "No," he told her, and she nodded. "Then why do you seem so upset still?" "Come sit with me, please," she said, and he sighed and gave a nod before sitting next to her on his bed. She snuggled up to his side and linked their fingers together, her small delicate hand in his much larger one. "You are hurt." "I don't like it," he told her, and she cracked a smile. "I don't like it either. But you saved me. I feel safe here with you," she told him, and he nodded before brushing a hand through her hair. He felt comfortable talking with her when no one was around. He might not say a lot, but he would try for her. "We're leaving," he told her, and her head snapped up from where she was laying it against her arm and looked at him in shock. "Where are we going?" she asked, and he shrugged. "Away. Haddonfield first," he said, reaching over and picking up a news article. She took it and read it over. It was all about how Michael killed his older sister, her boyfriend, and his mother's abusive boyfriend when he was 10. Then it showed where his mother committed suicide and his little sister was put up for adoption. "You want to try to find your sister?" she asked, and he nodded. "Boo," he said, tapping the picture of his baby sister. "She's probably in high school now. What do you plan to do when you find her?" she asked, handing him his paperback, and he placed it back in the backpack. "Try to get her to come with us. If not, kill her," he said, and she nodded. Michael valued loyalty to the extreme. She knew he hoped his sister would remember him and be willing to run with them, but she also knew if she fought him he would see it as betrayal and she'd be dead just like his older sister. "Maybe after we can find a small house in the woods somewhere no one can find us, and you can do whatever you want," she said, and he nodded. He liked that idea. He never planned to stop killing. That was just ingrained inside of him. But it would be nice to have somewhere he could be with Bella, and they would be safe and no one could find them. Bella was truly the only one safe from him. The only one he'd never be able to harm. As much as he wanted Boo to come with them too, he knew there was a big possibility that wasn't going to happen, and he had no problem ending her too, but Bella. He could never harm her. "After Haddonfield, Forks," he said, and she nodded. "Yes. I want them fuckers dead," she said with a firm tone, and he nodded to her. "I'll make sure they pay," he told her, and she smiled over at him. It was a heady feeling knowing he would kill someone for her if she asked. It was a power she'd never had and was quickly liking. "When do we leave?" she asked him. "Nightfall," he said, and she nodded. She knew he must have one hell of a plan to break them out of this place tonight, but Bella knew she'd go anywhere with him. She was in deep and had no plans to ever come out of it. Michael apparently had been planning his escape for years, and he was extremely observant. Bella saw where he kept tabs on the guard change and who would be the easiest to subdue. When he showed her his drawn-out plan he had hidden in the vent, she was impressed. He had been moved around the sanitarium quite a few times and knew the layout really well. He knew from the nurse he had killed a few years back with a fork that there was an employee entrance that was used on this side of the building. She had been talking on a cell phone one day when she was cleaning his room and asked someone to meet her outside of it to smoke, and he had never forgotten that. Bella didn't really have anything to take with her, but she put her mask he made in his backpack along with her wallet that she went and got from her room earlier that day. She folded up his blanket on the bed and slid it into the backpack in case they needed it. It was the day before Halloween and she knew it would be cold outside. Slipping into her tennis shoes, she waited for him to make his move. He had been ready for hours and pulled a good-sized pocket knife out of the vent as well. He told her he stole it off a guard a few years ago and no one ever knew where it went or that he had anything to do with it going missing. Clicking it open, he held it tightly in his hand as he watched and listened outside. He was counting the locks and the lights automatically shutting off, and he knew the shift change had happened. Opening the door slowly, there was a new young guard walking back and forth between a few doors in that hallway now that Rodriguez was dead. Michael moved silently for his size, and when the guard passed his room again, he struck like a snake. He latched out, grabbed the guard and dragged him into the room and stabbed him in the neck, killing him in moments. Bella watched as he killed the man in front of her with no remorse. He was totally in his element, and he made it look like an art form. The old Bella would have been appalled at what she was seeing, but the new Bella, the one post-betrayal, had no issues. She knew who Michael was to her, and she knew he would never hurt her, and that was enough for her. She was tired of being the good girl falling for the good guy that hadn't worked out for her in the past. Now she was the I don't give a fuck girl in love with a dangerous bad guy, and she felt more alive watching him work than she had in as long as she could remember. And she knew she loved him. Loved him with a force that probably wasn't healthy, but she could care less. She was addicted to him and knew he was her life now. Moving forward, she grabbed his gun, keys to the doors and car keys he had in his pocket along with the cash he had in his wallet, and put it in her pocket, keeping the door keys and gun in her hand. She shouldered the backpack before going to Michael's side as he held his free hand out to her. He had been watching to see how she would react to him killing someone in cold blood. Saving her was one thing, but killing just to kill, he didn't know how she would take that. If she had an issue with it, he would keep it to a minimum from doing it in front of her if she wished, but he was pleasantly surprised that she seemed to enjoy it. She didn't cringe and her eyes didn't widen in fear. She appeared to be very turned on by what she was seeing, and Michael knew then she would never leave him no matter what. She was here to stay, and nothing he did would make her run. She would stand at his side. Gripping her hand tightly in his, he peeked outside and down the hall and saw no one knew yet what he had done. Nodding to her, he pulled her quickly down the hall and let her unlock the first door. The next stop was the guard booth. Bella waited outside as Michael walked in silently and saw two guards flipping through a Playboy magazine and not paying any attention to the monitors. Stabbing the first, the other gasped in fear and turned towards him, but Michael was faster and stabbed him through the eye before he could grab his gun. Bella ran in then and did the same as before. Stole their money, guns and keys before nodding to him. Looking at the monitors, Bella ran over and threw the breaker to the building, casting the whole sanitarium in darkness and shutting off the cameras. Michael gave a nod of approval. They made a good team. Moving down the hall, they hid in the darkness as nurses ran through the halls, freaking out as they made their way towards the employee exit at the other end of the long hall. Michael sliced through two nurses that came close enough to see them before they moved back down the hall. Bella unlocked the exit door before sliding outside and shutting it back. Turning, they walked towards the parking lot as Bella dug out all the car keys and started hitting unlock buttons. Michael chose a small SUV with tinted windows, and Bella nodded as she slid into the driver's side, knowing Michael didn't know how to drive. Looking around the car, Michael pulled out a map from the glove box and opened it up as Bella pulled out of the parking lot and headed for the guard tower. The guard stopped them at the gate, and Bella rolled the window down and smiled at the guard. "Open the gate, please," she said, and the guard jumped back in alarm when he saw Michael sitting in the passenger seat with his mask on, glaring through the eye holes. He reached for the alarm button on his radio, and Bella sighed. Picked up one of the guns and pointed it out the window. "Don't," she said, and he raised his hands up in surrender. "All right. Easy now," he said. "Open the gate." "I won't ask again," she said, and Michael felt his member twitch watching her. He was prepared to get out and kill him when the gate opened and Bella pulled the trigger, shooting him in the head. Rolling the window up, she sat the gun back in the cup holder before grabbing one of his hands and holding it tightly as she pulled off, no remorse for what she had to do, and Michael smirked under his mask. She truly was the devil's bride. They drove for over 2 hours before they came across a small thrift store, and Michael pointed to the store. Nodding, Bella pulled around back and shut off the car. "We need to change," he told her, and she nodded, grabbed the gun and followed Michael out. She shot the lock off the door as they slide inside. Bella stopped Michael when she saw the camera system in the store, so she borrowed his bloody knife and popped open the fuse box and ripped all the cords out, and Michael saw all the little red lights go off on the cameras and he smirked. She was incredibly intelligent. Bella grabbed a couple duffel bags and handed one to Michael as they separated to find clothes. Bella changed quickly and filled the bag with enough clothes to last her for a while before moving around and picking up a few blankets, a few books she liked. She filled another bag up with the water from the drink cooler and all the snacks they had in the store. Michael met her towards the back and took the bags from her. Bella smirked when she saw him. He was wearing a new mask. It was a white face with fake short hair and covered all the way down his neck. He was also wearing jeans and a flannel shirt and boots, but she could see a few mechanic-style jumpsuits stuffed down in the bag along with all the flannel shirts and jeans he could find. Walking back out, Bella stopped when she saw a row of wigs and decided to grab one that was a dark red color before running back outside and jumping back into the car. Michael tilted his head and pointed to the wig and she shrugged. "Never know, I might need a disguise," she said, and he nodded as they pulled back off. When Dr. Loomis was called and told there was a breakout and several guards and nurses were killed, he knew Michael had finally done it. It had enough of sitting behind the walls, and he was out again, and he knew he took Bella with him and knew Halloween would never be the same again. The boogeyman was out and there would be hell to pay to anyone that got in his way. When Bella started yawning, Michael knew they would need to stop. They were close enough to Haddonfield that they could take a break, plus they needed to get rid of the stolen car. "Drive down here," he said, and she nodded and pulled off the road to a small dirt road and drove down by the river. "We need to ditch the car," he told her, and she agreed as she got out and unloaded all their bags as Michael pushed the car easily into the deep river. They watched it sink and disappears before Michael picked up most of the bags, leaving Bella with the backpack as they walked down the road. About 2 miles down the road they came across a run-down, cheap motel off the main road, and Michael headed that direction. "You sure you want to stop?" she asked, and he gave a nod. "We need to rest," he told her, and she nodded as they walked up to the office. "Wait. I'll go in and rent a room," she said, sitting the backpack down and pulling her hair into a bun before sliding the red-headed wig over her head and making sure it was on before putting on a ball cap she stole from the thrift store. Looking up at Michael, he gave her a nod of approval as she smiled and headed inside. There was an old lady behind the counter watching TV and filing her nails. She didn't even look up at Bella when she walked in. "One bed or two?" the lady asked. "One, please," Bella said as the lady took a key off the hook and walked over, barely glancing at Bella as she did. "50 a night, and we have bagels in the morning," she said, and Bella tossed her 50 before taking the key and walking out to where Michael was still waiting. "Let's go," Bella said as Michael led the way up the stairs to the top floor where their room was. Bella unlocked the door and flipped the light on. It wasn't much. Queen-sized bed, TV with antenna, and a bathroom, but it was warm and they were free. They took turns showering as Bella removed the wig and tossed it in the bag as Michael cleaned off his knife and washed the blood off his hands. Once they were both done, Bella pulled the blankets down and tossed one of the extras on the bed for more warmth before sliding in beside Michael and turning to face him as he sat on the side of the bed. She wasn't sure what he was doing, but when he reached up and removed the new mask from his face and sat it on the bedside table, she was shocked. She'd never seen him take the mask off. She couldn't see his face yet as his back from still to her, but his long dirty blonde hair fell down damp just past his shoulders. He was wearing a white t-shirt and sleek pants he'd picked up at the store as he ran his hands over his face. She knew it must feel very strange to be without it since he'd been wearing them for years, and she waited to see what he planned to do. When he turned towards her, she sat up and was stunned. "Damn. You're beautiful," she said as she looked at him. He apparently had shaved during his shower, but he still had a little hair and goatee, but he had a strong jaw and perfect nose. He was incredibly handsome, and with the long hair and dark eyes, Bella felt herself shiver in desire. Michael sat still as she moved forward and ran her fingers over his face. He felt very naked without the mask on, but he didn't want to wear it with Bella. He wanted to be completely free, and was pleased that she seemed to like the way he looked, the same as he very much liked the way she looked as well. Feeling her touch made desire course through him. He'd always hated touch, but he craved hers, and he closed his eyes when her hand cupped his cheek and ran her thumb over his lips. You know, I think I want to be the only one to see this beautiful face, she said, and he nodded before grabbing her fingers on his cheek with his larger one and kissing her palm. Her breath caught in her throat before she leaned forward and placed a tentative kiss on his lips. His body viable jerked when she kissed him and his eyes shot open. It was the first time he'd ever felt a kiss on the lips. She looked worried he didn't like it before he cupped her cheeks in both his hands and pulled her back and kissed her hard. She moaned as her hands gripped in his hair hard, and she pulled herself closer to him as he wrapped one of his large arms around her waist and pulled her as close as he could. He'd never felt desire for anyone before until he met Bella, never wanted to lay with anyone, only kill, but now it was like a floodgate had been opened and he wanted to crawl inside her and never leave. He dominated her mouth and kissed her in a way she'd never been kissed before, and it made her head spin and her body heat all over. God, this man was dangerous and sexy and did things to her Edward and Jake could never do, and she was hooked now. He was hers and no one was taking him from her. He ran his hands down her back and gripped her ass before lifting her effortlessly. She wrapped her legs around his waist as he laid her back on the pillow and covered her with his larger body, never breaking away from the kiss. When she needed air desperately, she pulled back with a loud pant, raking her nails in his hair as he moved his kisses to her neck. He buried his face in her neck, taking deep breaths of her sweet smell before kissing and sucking at the junction between her neck and shoulder. Bella moaned loudly, as apparently that was a hot spot for her, and Michael smirked against her neck when her grip tightened in his hair as he sucked a dark spot on her neck. He'd never felt like this. Only even feeling anger and rage. This was a new emotion for him. Lust, desire, and love. He wanted her with a fierceness he couldn't contain, and he prayed she didn't tell him to stop. He would, of course, if she asked, but he'd have to go kill a lot of people to ease the tension he was quickly feeling. He was harder than he'd ever been before. Her soft body under him and moans were wreaking havoc on him, and he was quickly losing control. When his hands slipped under her shirt and ran them over her stomach, she got impatient and sat up enough to pull the shirt off. He bent down and kissed the healing cut on her stomach from her attack as he moved his kisses and hands all over her chest and stomach. She quivered under him and arched off the bed when his lips closed around one of her nipples and sucked hard. Shit! She hissed, holding his head against her with her hands pulling harder on his hair. He groaned at her taste and could gladly stay here for hours, feasting off her soft breast. He felt her tugging on his shirt, so he sat up and ripped it off and tossed it to the floor. She sat up some and ran her hand over this chest. It was toned and had a little hair. He was so fucking beautiful. He stayed on his knees and let her touch him all she wanted, his muscles clenching at her touch. Biting her lips, she sat up completely and planted kisses along his chest and stomach, nipping at his nipples as she went, and ranked her nails down his chest. Fuck. He hissed out, and he felt her smirk against his stomach. When she pushed his sleep pants down, he moved them off and tossed them to the side as she saw him naked for the first time. She ran her hands lovingly over his staff. He was large everywhere, and she wondered if it would even fit, but she knew it would and couldn't wait to feel him inside her. He pulled her back for a kiss as he laid her back down and pulled her pants and underwear off. She was glorious naked, and he ran his hands up her legs and parted her thighs for him as he kissed down her chest, stomach, and settled down between her legs. He'd never done any of this before, and he didn't think she had either, but he absolutely had to taste her. Running this tongue over her folds up to her clit made her gasp loudly and moan his name. She tasted like sweet fruit, and he dove in like a man starved. She gripped his hair hard and grinded against his mouth as he quickly brought her to orgasm with his mouth and fingers, opening her up for him, and drank down everything she gave him. Kissing back up her body, she smiled up at him as he continued to stretch her with his fingers. She quickly started heating back up and needed him now. Now, Michael, please. She begged, and his eyes were so dark with lust they were damn near black as he pulled his fingers from her and settled back over her again. Are you sure? You'll be mine once we do this, he told her as he kissed her neck again. Yes, please. I'm already yours, baby, he told her, and he closed his eyes in pleasure hearing her say it as he linked their fingers, carefully of her injuries on her wrist and brought them over her head, giving her something to clench as he slowly started easing inside her. Pleasure like he'd never know shot up his spine as he felt her body give under him as he slowly sank into her, tearing through her barrier as he went. She never tensed in pain, only arched her back and spread her legs wider as he bottomed out. She gripped his hands hard, staring into his eyes as she gave herself to him completely. He let her hands go and cupped her face as he kissed her again and just enjoyed the feel of her clenching around him. "I love you," she told him when he pulled back and he laid his forehead over hers. "And I love you. Never anyone else," he told her, and he meant it. He'd never and would never love another woman other than Bella, and she nodded in understanding what it was he was trying to say as she wrapped her legs around his body and moved under him. He pulled out and thirsted back in, and she almost screamed in pleasure. God, he felt amazing. They soon started panting hard, and Bella moaned under him and begged him for harder and faster, and he did everything she asked. When he ran his hands up her stomach and wrapped one of his hands lightly around her throat, he felt her gush and she panted harder and ranked her nails down his chest, and he snapped and took her hard and fast, holding her down by her throat and gripped her tight enough she felt it but never enough to hurt her. It appeared to both Bella and Michael their taste in sex ran way different than the normal vanilla sex, and Bella loved knowing her life was in his hands, but he'd never hurt her, and he loved she seemed to take everything he gave her. No matter how hard he fucked her, she only moaned and asked for more. When she tightened around him hard and cursed as her orgasm rushed over her, he released his own with a loud growl so violently his hand on the headboard snapped a small piece off as the pleasure of his first orgasm hit him hard. He felt so high as he fell down beside her and pulled her against him tightly and ran his hands possessively over her body. He was so connected to her right now at a dangerous level. He felt like a piece of his dark soul merged with her own, and he felt complete. Damn, that was good. She panted as she lay against his chest and ran her hand over his and linked their hand together. He nodded in agreement, unable to say anything as the feeling floated around inside him as he closed his eyes and enjoyed it. He loved she allowed him to dominate her in a way she knew he needed to, and she loved how it made her feel when he did it. She trusted him enough to know a killer had his hands around her throat, and she got off on it. She was utterly perfect, and it physically made him sick to think of not having her in his life, and knew he'd never allow that to happen. Waking up the next afternoon with her back to his chest and he was curled possessively around her was a new experience for him. He didn't think he'd ever be able to sleep any other way ever again. Looking her over, he smirked when he saw a few bruises on her body from their coupling, but she had a smile on her face as he kissed her shoulders and neck. She groaned and she rolled over and smiled up at him. "Morning," she said sleepily and kissed him quickly. "Are you okay?" he asked, running his hand down her stomach and back up. She nodded with a smirk. "I am deliciously sore, but I need to pee," she said, and he chuckled as she hopped off the bed and winced a little at her slight soreness before heading to the restroom. He liked the domesticated feel of being free with Bella. Her idea of finding a cabin in the woods somewhere remote was very appealing to him now. Once she was showered and dressed, she ran down to the lobby to grab some of the bagels that were left and brought them back as Michael was dressing in the jumpsuit and watching the news. There was a lot of talk of their escape and their pictures on the news, but Bella wasn't worried. She knew Michael wouldn't let them get caught. "When and how do you want to head to Haddonfield?" she asked, and he looked over at her as he swallowed his food. "We need another car and drive the remaining 30 minutes to my old house," he said, and she nodded. "Do you know where to start to find Angel?" she asked, and he shook his head. "I'll go to the local library and look up old newspaper articles to find out what I can," she said, and he nodded. They packed up quickly after that and headed towards Haddonfield. Haddonfield, Illinois was a lot like Forks minus the rain. It was small and everyone looked the same. Very cookie-cutter, and Bella smirked to herself as she thought of the terror Michael would bring to this quiet, family-friendly town. It would never be the same again. Bella stopped by the library first, and Michael stayed in the car looking around at all the people walking down the street as memories of his time in this town flittered through his mind. 30 minutes later, Bella came out and handed him the news article. "That was easy. They put everything in the paper here. She was adopted a month after your mother's death by the Strode family, and they changed her name to Lori. This is what she looks like now." It's a senior picture from the cheerleading team, Bella said, handing him everything she found. He looked it all over and memorized what his picture now looked like, and he nodded. Thank you, he told her, and she smiled as she kissed him before starting the car. Wanna wait outside the high school to see if we see her leave? It should be getting out soon, she asked, and he nodded. They sat in silence watching the kids leaving slowly from the school decorated for Halloween. When his sister walked out walking with another girl dressed in cheerleader outfits, Michael sat up and watched them closer. Boo was much different than he remembered. Bella followed along behind the girls, keeping a good distance as they watched to see what house she went to, and it happened to be on the same street and only a few houses down from Michael's old house. She could feel how tense he was as the sun started to set and they made their way to his old house in their new stolen car they took from the hotel parking lot. Bella parked in the back so no one could see the car as they got out, and Michael easily broke into the house. It hadn't been lived in since he had been a small child, but you could tell people had broken in over the years to mess around in the house. Bella followed him as he went into a small bedroom upstairs and ripped the wooden floorboard off before pulling out a baby blanket that had a large kitchen knife wrapped inside and a picture of him and Boo. He had his weapon now, and all he needed was darkness to hide him as he hunted. Do you want me to stay here and wait for you? I don't want to slow you down or be a liability for you, she said, and he nodded as he moved an old couch from one of the bedrooms into his old room and put it by the window so she could watch. He wanted her with him but knew she was right. He needed to be able to move fast and hopefully bring Boo back with him so they could leave once he was done. Okay, I'll wait here and hopefully be able to watch some since the houses are close together. I'll keep everything packed in the car so we can leave quickly, she told him, and he nodded again before pulling her down onto the couch and wait for nighttime to hit. She snuggled against him and pulled out a book they had been reading at the sanitarium and began to read as they passed the time, and Michael sat, relaxed, listening to his girl read as he waited for his fun to begin. When it was good and dark, Michael kissed Bella deeply before sliding his new mask on and zipping up his jumpsuit and grabbed his knife. Bella smiled up at him and gave him a wave as he walked out of the room. Have fun, she called back, and Michael smirked under his mask. She was amazing. Bella stayed glued to the open window as she sat silently and watched kids trick-or-treating up and down the road. She saw a few teenagers going from house to house and kissing behind the trees, and she rolled her eyes. It took only 30 minutes before she heard the first scream, and she chuckled. Michael was having fun. Michael went to the home they knew his sister now lived, and he watched from the windows as another girl talked her into going across the street to babysit a couple kids so she would have fun with her boyfriend for a little while. His sister agreed, and Michael snuck inside and stabbed her friend in the neck, cutting of her screams. When the boyfriend showed up, he quickly sliced into him and dragged him inside with the girl before making his way back outside. He saw another couple having sex in the car outside, and Michael just couldn't resist as he opened the door and stabbed them both mid-act. Michael smirked as he looked back towards the house Bella was in and knew she had heard the screams at least. He wished she could be there with him, but he'd make sure she had fun when they went to Forks for her revenge. He saw a few other kids go into the house his sister was in, and Michael decided it was time to make his way over. He crept through the house silently and saw a boy making out with his sister on the couch, and Michael curled his lip as he checked the rest of the house. The two small children were asleep, so Michael closed their doors so they wouldn't hear anything. He had no interest in killing children. There was a teenage girl in the bathroom changing, and Michael waited until her naked back was to him before he walked in and covered her mouth with his hand so she wouldn't scream before slicing though her stomach and then her neck. He looked down at her for a moment before shaking his head. He had absolutely no desire for any other female other than his Bella. She was truly special. Making his way back down the stairs now that the house was cleared, he watched his sister for a while. She was panting as this boy ran his hands up her shirt, and Michael sneered. She had turned into the same slut as his older sister had been. Gritting his teeth, he walked forward and saw her eyes widen as he plunged the knife into the back of the boy. His sister let out a blood-curdling scream as he dragged the boy off her and stabbed him repeatedly. When he was good and dead, he turned as his sister tried to run to the door, but he was faster and stronger and grabbed her and tossed her over his shoulder and headed outside. She kicked and screamed as he walked before he sat her down in the yard and put his finger to his lip. She tensed them and cried, but she stopped screaming as he pulled out 2 pictures and handed them to her. "What is this? What do you want?" she asked, and he pointed to the picture of them as children and then pointed to her and them him before showing her the article of their mother and of him. She looked it over before shoving them back at him. "You think I'm your sister? You're fucking crazy. Help!" she screamed before running. He let her run as disappointment flooded through him before it was replaced with anger. His sister had rejected him and now she was going to die along with anyone that got in his way. He cut the power to her house so she couldn't make a phone call before heading back into the house where she was crying over the body of her best friend and the other boy. She screamed in rage before heading back outside yelling for help. He stood in the darkness of the house and watched a police car stop and talk to her before he ran into the house. Michael was waiting and stabbed him before he could make it past the entryway before he walked out of the house and stared his sister down. She screamed in horror before taking off again. Bella had watched his sister scream and run from him and she frowned. Michael would not take that well. She was startled by a car pulling up in front of the house and she gasped when she saw Dr. Loomis getting out and running towards the house. Bella ran and hid in the closet of Michael's old room and listened for the doctor to leave. She took a gun out of her bag and held it in her hands as she listened to the footsteps. Michael let his sister run from house to house trying to get someone to open the door. He enjoyed her fear as he easily stalked her down the street. Finally he had enough and grabbed her by the neck as she left the porch of another house with no one home. She gasped and struggled as he lifted her up and shoved her against the side of the house. "Please. I don't know what you want from me," she cried, and he sneered at the pathetic display she was putting on. It made him sick that his bloodline was still so fucking weak. "Bye, boo," he told her, and he saw a flash of remembrance before it settled back to fear as he stabbed her in the stomach the same way he did his older sister. She gasped in pain as blood poured to the ground and he let her drop. He watched her try to crawl backwards from him as he stalked her for a while before he sliced across her throat, killing the last of his family. He was unhappy this had not worked out the way he wanted, but he knew it was a long shot. He had been gone too long and she had no idea who she really was until he showed her. She had turned out to be the very thing he loved to kill. A gunshot sounding at his old house snapped his head to the side and he ran through the backyards towards his house. Bella would never have shot that for no reason, and whoever it was that caused that was about to be fucking dead. Bella had waited until he heard the footsteps come into the room before she slowly opened the door. Dr. Loomis had his back to her looking at the couch before he froze when he heard the door open and the click of a gun. "Turn around," Bella told him, and he sighed. He turned around slowly and saw the girl and knew Michael wouldn't be far away. "Where's Michael, Bella?" he asked, and she scoffed. "Busy. What are you doing here, Loomis?" she asked, and he had never heard her talk so much or be so forceful. "I'm here to bring Michael back. You know he's too dangerous to be allowed free," Dr. Loomis told her, and Bella snorted. "You're an idiot if you think for a second I'd help you put him back in that place," she said, and the doctor sighed. "He'll hurt you one day too," he said, knowing that was a lie, and Bella rolled her eyes at him. "He'd never hurt me." "I can't say the same about you though," she said before shooting him in the leg. He yelled out as his knees hit the floor and he fell over in pain, clutching his leg as blood seeped into the floor. He looked at Bella then. She had hard eyes, glaring down at him. He got the impression she was in protective mode. She'd protect Michael any way she had to, and that included killing anyone that got in the way. "Michael is mine and no one will take him from me. I don't give a fuck who it is," she said just as he heard thundering steps running up the stairs as Michael, covered in blood, appeared in the doorway. Bella's whole face changed the moment she laid eyes on him, and he saw the love she had for the monster and knew there was no saving Bella now. She had truly fallen for the devil. "Our old friend is here to take you from me, Michael. What do you think about that?" Bella asked, and Michael snarled under his new mask and gripped the knife in his hand. He walked around Bella to make sure she was okay before he brushed his other hand down her cheek. She smiled at him before Michael turned back to the doctor that had kept him locked away. "Michael, please. I only ever try to help you." He begged, and Bella scoffed as she watched Michael walk forward slowly before bending down over Loomis's form. He just shook his head before jabbing the knife into his chest over and over again, killing him the way he had pictured for years. Once Loomis was dead, Michael stood and turned back towards Bella, taking off his mask as she put the gun back into her bag and dropped it to the floor. "What happened with Boo?" she asked, and Michael shook his head. "She wouldn't listen?" Bella asked, and Michael nodded. "Killed her," Michael said, and Bella nodded before walking forward and kissing him deeply. "Don't worry, baby. You still have me, and I'm not ever going anywhere," she told him, and he sighed as he pulled her against him and kissed her again. She was all he needed, and now he had no other attachments. Picking Bella up in his arms, he walked back over and sat on the couch with her straddling him as he kissed her, cupping her face in his large hands. Bella moaned as she felt him hard under his bloody jumpsuit, and she grinded down against him, causing him to hiss in pleasure. He was so high on his kills right now that he needed Bella. Bella pulled back, panting, before yanking off her shirt and tossing to the side and sliding out of her bra. Michael immediately grabbed her breast and pulled them to his mouth, kneading them roughly, and Bella moaned and gripped his hair hard. She tugged at the zipper of his jumpsuit, and he helped her slide his arms out before lifting and sliding it off, kicking off his boots until he was naked. Bella stood up, and he watched her with hooded eyes as she slid her jeans down her legs along with her panties before coming back and straddling his lap again. He hissed when she grabbed his cock and ran her hands roughly over it for a moment, biting her lips as she looked into his eyes before he groaned as she lowered herself slowly down him until he was all the way inside. She kissed him again before she started moving over him, with him fucking up into her as she moved. They both moaned at how fucking good it felt, and when he reached down and rubbed against her clit roughly and gripped her neck with his other hand, she fell apart in his arms in the same room as one of his kills. He couldn't hold back after that and thirsted up into her hard before his orgasm shot through him. He held her in his lap for a while before they started hearing sirens off in the distance and knew it was time to leave. Bella slid off him slowly before cleaning herself up quickly and dressing. He tossed the jumpsuit on the floor and pulling on the jeans and flannel she handed him before packing everything up. "Do you want to leave him here?" she asked, and he nodded, cleaning off his knife and putting it in their backpack. They left nothing behind except the dead body of Loomis and his bloody jumpsuit before Bella pulled him back downstairs and towards their hidden car. They were out of Haddonfield moments after heading to their next haunt, Forks, and there was 4 people she had a bone to pick with there, and she knew just the house they would be staying at, and she smirked to herself at the thoughts running through her head. This would be fun. They took their time getting to Forks, stopping several places along the way. Michael enjoyed being able to take his time in choosing a target and killing them slowly before they moved on their way. Bella chuckled as Michael returned to her every night covered in blood. They ended up having to stop at a local hardware store to purchase more jumpsuits for him since he had bloodied up all the ones he stole from the thrift store. Reaching Forks, Bella drove slowly along the streets. Nothing had changed since she'd been sent away. Passing her old home, she stopped in front of it for a moment and just stared out the window. There was a for sale sign on it from the bank. She knew her father still owed on the mortgage, and more than likely once he was killed the bank took it back. It was a prime location and would sell easy. She wasn't sure where everything on the inside had been taken, but it appeared to be empty. She didn't have anything she wanted to keep really, but she planned to do a little research to see if they were planning to sell everything from the house. If so, she'd steal back anything she wanted if it was still available. She felt Michael's hand on hers and smiled over at him. He knew this was hard for her. Her father's death really hurt, but having him made it bearable. "Let's go," she told him, and he gave a nod as she pulled away. She drove towards the outskirts of town and pulled up in front of the familiar glass front home in the woods and turned the car off and smirked. This is the Cullens' home. When they move, they never sell their homes because they come back many years later. I doubt they've been back since they left me, and the thought of defiling their home makes me giddy, she told him, and he chuckled darkly as he followed her out of the car. Walking around the back, Michael used his knife and jimmied the door open before walking inside. "No alarm?" he asked, and she shook her head. "They're vampires. They don't need security," she said, shutting the doorway. "Hello," she yelled out, and when no one answered, she smiled. They walked from room to room. Every piece of furniture had a sheet draped over it, giving the appearance of an old haunted manor. When they made it to the top of the stairs and into Edward's old room, Bella smirked as she turned to Michael and crooked her finger at him, walking backwards into the room. "I want you to fuck me in Edward's old room," she said, and Michael smirked as he stalked forward towards her, backing her into the wall next to the stereo. She felt very devious right now. Stripping quickly, Michael easily picked her up and she wrapped her legs around his waist and he guided his cock into her tight wet heat. They both moaned out and stilled. This way was different than the previous ways they had sex, and it felt very naughty, and for Bella, knowing it was a big fuck you to Edward made it very exciting. Finally pulling out and pushing back in hard, he fucked Bella into the wall and she screamed and moaned for more each time. When they finally reached their end rather quickly, he pulled away from the wall and dropped down on the black couch. They ended up falling asleep for a few hours, exhausted from the trip and the climax that drained them of their energy. Waking up just before dusk, they showered and changed after Bella ran and grabbed one of their bags before she decided to do a little more snooping in the house. Michael followed her into a large office as she flicked the lights on. "This is Carlisle's office?" she said, and he nodded and moved to look around. He ended up looking a long time at a large painting on the wall behind the desk, and Bella turned and looked at it as well. "Edward told me about this once when I asked." "This is a painting of Carlisle's time with the Volturi. See, this is him, and these are the three Volturi brothers, Aro, Marcus, and Keys. They are the vampire kings and rule the race. They live in Italy, and Aro likes to collect gifted vampires, which makes them feared. They make sure other vampires follow the rules." She explained, and nodded. "I bet they'd love to know what the Cullens have been up to this past year," she said before going back to the desk and opening the laptop sitting on top. She logged into the internet and did her research. She found the four that were in the car that killed her father was Mike, Tyler, Lauren and Jessica, the four she hated the most back in school. She also saw they were still living in Forks and wrote down all their address. Glancing over to the side, she saw Michael flipping through one of Carlisle's books and she turned back to the laptop. Researching her father's death more, she saw the house was up for sale that week and all the possessions had been put in a storage shed in town and planned to have a sale in 2 weeks, which meant Bella had time to collect things she wanted. She also looked up Carlisle names just to see if anything came up, and lo and behold, he was working in a hospital in Alaska. Well, at least she knew where they might be. Closing the computer after shutting it down, she looked in the drawers and found a small silver key tapped to the underside of the middle drawer. "I wonder what this is for?" she asked, looking around. Michael looked as well and tilted his head to the side as he looked back at the bookshelf before walking to the side and pushing hard. The bookshelf shifted to the side and revealed a big safe with a single keyhole. Well, they are sneaking," she said before slipping the key inside and opening it up. Bella raised her brow and shared a shocked look with Michael. There were several stacks of money inside, some jewelry, and several brown packages of envelopes, 7 to be exact. She opened one and saw it was IDs and paperwork for each of the family members and different names. Each envelope was for each member, and it showed how they were able to move around and buy things over the years using different names, with receipts from a man named Jenks. "This is interesting. I knew they used different names, but I didn't know they knew someone that did it for them. I thought they made them up themselves and just used old family names from when they were human. We might want to think of doing this one day," she said, and he nodded. She pocked the receipt with the man's info and bagged up all the money. She didn't care about the jewelry. There was an address book in it, and she decided to take that too before shutting the safe and letting Michael move the bookshelf back. "Ready?" she said, and he nodded. They dressed and Michael put his mask back on as Bella packed everything up. She wanted to keep everything with them just in case they had to leave quickly. Before leaving, she got another idea. Walking into the garage, she smirked. They had left behind a black SUV with tinted windows, and Bella grabbed the keys off the wall and decided they were changing cars. She parked their stolen one in their garage, not caring if they get popped for it later on, and pulled the black SUV out of the garage and loaded everything up before they headed to the first house, Mike Newton's place. Mike was home alone. Bella remembered his parents used to travel a lot and leave Mike in charge of the store while they were gone, and it seemed now he was graduated he didn't plan to do much but live off his parents' money. That same money that got him out of jail time for killing her father. Parking in the driveway, she walked to the door and knocked. Michael walked around back to find another way inside. Mike opened the door and his eyes widened as he saw Bella standing there. She could see the faded bruises still on him from the wreck. "Hey Mike. Can I come in?" she said, giving him a smile. He looked her over before nodding. "Yeah, hey Arizona. Damn, I thought you got sent away," he said as Bella slid inside and he closed the door behind her. "I did for a minute, but I'm back now." "So your parents on another trip?" she asked, and he nodded as he led her towards the living room. "Yeah, Mexico this time, I think." "Look, about Chief Swan, I'm really sorry, Bella. It was a total accident," he said, and she clenched her palm to try and not lash out. "That's one hell of an accident, Mike." "My father's dead now," she said, and he sighed and gave a mournful nod. "I know, and he was a pretty cool guy. I wish there was some way to make it better," he said, and Bella saw Michael coming into the room from the kitchen and hiding in the shadow for now. Bella looked at the boy that at one time was her friend but used to hit on her all the time. She felt nothing for his apology and only just pissed her off. "Oh, but Mike, you can make it all better," Bella said, walking closer to the boy who was sitting on the couch. He looked up at her confused before Bella reeled back and punched him in the face hard. He cried out in pain as Bella shook off her hand and his nose started bleeding. He glared at her as he stood up. "What the fuck, Bella?" he asked as he turned to walk into the kitchen but stopped as Michael stepped into his path. He froze as he looked at the tall, large man with a mask holding a knife as Bella smirked and walked closer. "I'd like you to meet my new man. This is Michael, and we're here to make you fucking pay for what you did to my father. Then after we're done with you, we're moving on to the other 3 assholes." She hissed in his ear where she stood behind him and looked at Michael with a smirking glee on her face. Michael felt his face twitch as he watched her. Where he liked to make his victims piss their pants in fear, never having to utter a word, Bella it seemed like to taunt and feel the power she had over them, and Michael felt his dick twitch as she yanked the boy's head back by his hair. She nodded to Michael and he jammed his knife into the boy's side between his rib cage. Mike hit the ground hard with scream of pain as she grabbed his side. He panted as he started up at Bella and this monster of a man, tears flowing down his face. "Bella, please. I'm sorry, please," he begged, and she narrowed her eyes before reaching to borrow Michael's knife. He handed it to her immediately and brushed his other hand down her cheek. She tossed him a smile before moving to kneel over the crying boy. "Honestly, Mike, I don't give a fuck how sorry you are or how much of an accident you think it was. You fucking drove drunk with 2 whores and an idiot, and you killed a man and then got off because your parents have fucking money. You deserve everything you're going to get," she told him before gripping the handle of the blade and slamming it down on his thigh. He yelled out again and went to hit her, but Michael was faster and his large boot landed on his neck and held him down. Bella grabbed one of his hands and cut down his arm with the knife. She now understood why Michael loved using the knife. He could go as fast or as slow as he wanted. It made her think of what it might be like to be a vampire and play with your food. It was a thrilling feeling. Mike was choking on his own screams then, pain making it hard to talk, and Michael cutting into his oxygen made it worse. Michael stood above them and watched as she cut into him slowly with a smile on her face. He'd never seen anything sexier in his life, and watching her kill gave him just as much of a high as killing himself. When she was tired of playing with him, she tapped Michael's leg with her hand and he moved his foot just as Bella slashed across his neck with the blade. He gargled on the blood for a moment before falling limp, eyes still wide in fear. Standing, she handed Michael the knife and looked down to see she hadn't gotten much blood on her, and smirking when Michael pulled her against him and lifted his mask enough to kiss her deeply. Yeah, she could see why he enjoyed this so much. 1 down, 3 to go. It was going to be a fun night. Killing Tyler was quick and easy. Bella never really had any issues with him, and he was a passenger in the car, so Michael sliced through his neck as he was walking towards his car after getting off work at the local grocery store. They dragged his body behind the dumpster to be found later as they headed to where Lauren and Jessica should be. Lauren and Jessica shared a small two-bedroom house that Lauren's father owned and Michael was able to break in easily. Walking into the kitchen, she looked around and frowned when she saw a listing for the auction on her old house. It appeared Lauren's father planned to buy it, and that pissed Bella off. Snatching the paper off the fridge, she ripped it up and tossed it in the trash as she followed behind Michael. Jessica was sitting in the living room watching TV. Michael pointed upstairs and Bella nodded as she moved over towards Jessica as Michael went to find Lauren. The girl was still so unaware of her surroundings that Bella was able to move around and stand right in front of her before she jumped and looked at her. "Bella? What the hell?" she asked, going to stand, but Bella pulled a gun and stopped her. "Don't fucking move," Bella told her, and Jessica sat back down quickly, looking at her with wide eyes. "Bella, what are you doing?" she hissed, and Bella just tilted her head to the side and stared at the girl. "You really have no idea?" Bella asked, and Jessica shook her head no. They heard a thump upstairs and Bella smirked before looking back at Jessica. "Does my father's death bring anything to mind?" Bella asked, and Jessica's face lost all its color. She went to reply, but they heard a scream followed by Michael dragging a kicking and screaming Lauren down the stairs. When he dumped her on the couch next to Jessica, her eyes widened at Bella and the gun, and Jessica's eyes widened when she saw Michael. "Now that we're all here, I'll continue. You two bitches not only made my school life hell, but you contributed to the death of my father, and for that you will pay," Bella said, and both girls started to cry. Bella turned to Michael and gave him the seriously look, and Michael just shook his head. She could just see him rolling his eyes behind his mask. Jessica stared, begging, and Bella rolled her eyes before shooting her in the leg. Lauren jumped and tried to run, but Michael grabbed her neck and lifted her off the ground. Bella chuckled as she gasped for air before turning back towards Jessica, who looked like she was going to pass out from pain of a bullet hole in her leg. "Bella, please. We didn't mean it. We're sorry," Jessica cried, and Bella snorted before taking Michael's knife and jamming it in the side of her neck. "I don't accept your apology," Bella smirked. Jessica would bleed for a few minutes before actually dying, and Bella felt satisfaction knowing she would be in pain. She didn't know if her father had been in pain or really died instantly, but just in case he suffered, so would she. "What's the matter, Lauren? Having a hard time breathing?" I'm sorry," Bella said as she still gasped for air in Michael's grasp. Moving the knife, Bella slicing down her pretty face, causing her to scream out before she backed up and handed Michael the knife. "Kill her, baby. I want to watch," Bella said, and Michael nodded before shoving Lauren into the nearest wall and repeatedly stabbing her in the stomach. Bella smirked at each scream she let out before she finally died, and Michael tossed her to the floor. Jessica had died by then as well, and the floor and couch was covered in blood. It would make for an interesting front page once they were all found. Chuckling, Bella walked forward and grabbed Michael's hand before pulling him back outside. He kissed her by the car before they got in, and she drove to the storage shed that held her household things. She grabbed a few items she wanted, then she drove them back to the Cullens' house. They would need a shower for sure. They shared an enjoyable shower, both very high from the kills, and Bella satisfied they were finally gone. "That was fun. I think I might need to join you from time to time," Bella said as they dried off, and he nodded. "I'd like that," he told her, and she kissed him again before handing him his clothes. "We should burn these bloody clothes in the fireplace. You know, I now really don't understanding why the Cullens don't hunt humans. It's so fun," Bella said as they walked out of the bathroom before she stopped dead. "Who the fuck are you?" she asked, stopping Michael from walking forward. Standing there in expensive clothes with short hair and pale skin was a bright red-eyed vampire that Bella had never seen, and he was smirking at them in amusement. "My name is Dimitri, and I am the head of the Volturi Guard and the Tracker," he said, and Bella nodded. "I know who you are, I've heard of you," Bella said, tossing their bloody clothes into the fireplace next to the bathroom door and hitting the button to turn it on before turning back towards the vampire. He watched them as the large human glared at him and showed no fear, but it was obvious they both knew what he was. "That fact you know of me is concerning. Through it appears I missed quite the party giving the bloody clothes you're burning." He chuckled, and she smirked over at him as she handed Michael his mask and he put it in their bag. "You did. My name is Bella and this is Michael." I know who you are because I used to date one of the candy-ass vampires that lived in this house. She said, and Dmitri nodded. Which candy-ass vampire are you referring to? Dmitri asked, and Bella rolled her eyes. Edward the Virgin, 100-year-old vampire. She said, and Dmitri chuckled. So why have you come to the Cullen home? As far as I know, Aro is the only Volturi member he talks to as a friend. Bella asked, pulling Michael over and sitting him on the couch. Bella dropped down into his lap as they faced the vampire that had now taken a seat in the chair across from them. I'm sent to check up on them every 10 years or so to make sure they are not breaking any rules since they live so close to humans, and it appears this time I'll have lots to report, and they did not report their change of address to us yet. Dmitri said, and Bella laughed. Oh, you have no idea how much they've been fucking up this last year. Bella said, and Dmitri raised a brow. Do please continue. Dmitri said, and Bella did. She told him everything from start to finish, and even up till where she was committed and met Michael and what they were doing in Forks. Dmitri listened intently, and by the time she was finished it took him a moment to reply. Wow. I can't wait to tell the kings. Keyes is going to have a fucking field day with this shit. He's been waiting for a reason to nail Carlisle for many, many years. Dmitri said, chuckling, and Bella just watched and waited to see what he would do now that he knew everything. And you're the Michael Myers, huh? Dmitri asked, and Michael tilted his head to the side. You know him? Bella asked, and Dmitri nodded. Not personally, but we do keep track of humans that are above the norm for possible recruits. We've heard his story. Dmitri said, and Bella nodded. So now what? I'm a human that knows of your existence, and I in no way want to be turned by the Cullens anymore, so are you here to kill us? Bella asked, and Michael tensed under her. No, I'm not going to harm either of you. I think you'd make excellent vampires, and I know the masters would as well. How would you feel of being turned by the Volturi? Dmitri asked, and Bella and Michael shared a look. Up to you. Michael whispered in her ear, and she smirked. We'd have some conditions first, but I think that might be a good fit with our new life. Bella said, and Dmitri nodded before excusing himself to make a few calls as they gathered their things. He had a plane to arrange and masters to fill in before they could go. Just as he knew they would, they were pissed at what Bella had told them about the Cullens, and Aro was incredibly interested in meeting these two humans. He had a feeling they would be strong and dangerous vampires, and he wanted to make sure he secured them to their side and no one else gave them what they wanted. When Bella met the three kings, they greeted her warmly and listened to her tale, the same that she relayed to Dmitri. Michael, like always, didn't speak, letting Bella talk for them, but they were all shocked at his size and the danger he radiated even as a human, and knew as a vampire he'd be unstoppable, and they knew Bella would be gifted. Just like Edward's gift didn't work on Bella, neither did Aro's, and to their surprise it didn't work on Michael either, but that was probably more due to his mental issues than an actual gift. So what are these conditions you'd like to discuss? Keyes asked the humans he was quickly liking. We don't want to be separated at any time, during or after our turn. We also don't want to be forced to stay here. We want to get a cabin in the woods somewhere or be able to move around like nomads, and we want freedom to be able to kill as much as we want. That's something Michael enjoys, and I won't keep that from him, and I enjoy it as well. Also, we want to be completely a part of going after the Cullens. I want my revenge for their betrayal, and I want them to see the new me. Bella said, and the brothers shared a look before Aro nodded. I'm interested in seeing what you'll both become. As long as you don't draw attention to yourselves to humans, I could care less how many you kill and in what way. I'd like you to stay here during your newborn year until your control has developed, then you're free to come and go as you please. I'd like to know we can call on you if we need allies, but I won't require you to stay, but know you always have a room here if you want to stay at any time, and I would never keep mates apart for any reason that's against one of our rules, and I'd love to allow you your revenge. I just want the honor of taking care of Carlisle myself. Aro said, and Bella and Michael shared a look before they both nodded. Worked for them and they would be unstoppable and immortal. They could kill forever and Bella would never have to lose Michael. To say the Volturi was shocked as they watched Bella and Michael turn was an understatement. They had seen a lot of humans turned and turned several themselves, but they had never seen two people not make one sound the whole time. Keys was the one Bella chose to turn them, and he had been honored. For the past 3 days after he bit them, they had arched off the slab one time in the beginning, but no sounds left either of them. They stayed still and held hands the whole time, and it amazed the Volturi to watch. These two humans made just the strongest of them all. Bella knew the pain of the venom from the first time she was bit, so she had been ready for it, and she refused to scream and make Michael's transformation worse by hearing her screams, and she was glad she didn't hear any from him either. She felt a few times they gripped each other's hand, but other than that the 3 days passed in the same burning hot fire. She replayed all her memories with Michael over and over in her head, no wanting to lose any of them. She had been worried about that. Asked Keys if they would still be together if they'd both forgot, and Keys and Marcus ensured them both, and even if they don't remember their human lives, their bond as mates is securely in place, and they would know the moment they opened their eyes they belonged to each other. Bella had been relieved to hear that. Michael had been as well. When the 3 days was up, Bella's bright red eyes snapped open and she sat up and looked around. The Volturi all stood back, and she knew it was in case either of them tried to attack. Bella turned as she felt Michael and saw his now bright red eyes staring up at her, her hand still in his. He was beautiful to her before, but now as a vampire he was simple perfection, and she couldn't help but throw herself down on him and kiss him deeply. He returned the kiss with equal fervor, and she was relieved their bond was still just as strong, and it appeared her memories still intact. She heard a throat clear behind them, but she just shot them the bird as she kissed her mate. Nothing was more important to her right now than that. When they finally pulled back, Michael rubbed her cheek with his hand and she smiled at him. "My beautiful mate," he said to her, and if she could blush she would as she smiled at him. "Yes. All yours," she said, and he nodded as he too sat up staring into her eyes. "I know this is all new and the feeling are very intense, but you need to feed," Keys said, and they recognized him as their maker and reluctantly nodded. Hopping off the concrete slab, everyone took in their appearance. Michael was a force to be reckoned with. He was larger than Felix, with such an intense stare it made even the Volturi feel the need to flee. Bella was stunning to the point of a succubus, and immortality was made for her, and neither showed the normal signs of a ravaging newborn. They followed Keys down the hall, never parting as he led them into a sublevel of the basement and slid the door open. Both Bella and Michael's eyes went pitch black and they growled at the smell of human blood. "Enjoy," Keys told them, and they both raced forward and sank their teeth into the closeted human they could find. Keys and the others moved to the viewing platform above and watched, and Keys chuckled. They were far more vicious than even he had been in his early days. They painted the room in red after they drank their fill. They watched as Bella held the humans down and left Michael kill and crush them with his bare hands. They ripped apart bodies and soaked themselves in their blood. By the time they were done, the kings were now very glad they had turned these two before one of their enemies got to them first. They were terrified and they moved as one unit. Bella couldn't help but lick her lips as Michael stood before her, dripping in blood and snarling as he ripped apart the human before him. He was magnificent, and his rage and thirst for blood had only increased with his change, and it made him even more dangerous. Walking forward, she ran her own bloody hands down his back as watched as he completely changed at her mere touch. He went from completely in a rage and bloodlust to totally focused on her in an instant. Giving him a push, she shoved him against the bloody wall and latched onto his body with a force that left a Michael-sized dent in the stone wall. They heard chuckles from above before the sounds of footsteps leaving them alone as Michael growled and lifted her up to wrap her legs around his waist. Their clothes were ripped apart then, and Michael shoved Bella against the wall then and took her for the first time as a vampire. It was rough and hard and bloody and amazing as they thirsted into each other and bite into each other's neck, claiming them for everyone to see. Keys found them several hours later laying on the blood-covered floor, curled around each other, basking in the afterglow of several rounds, and he laughed. "Feel better now?" he said, and Michael gave him a warning growl as he covered Bella's body from his view. Keys rolled his eyes. "I already know who she belongs to, Michael, you need not worry. However, everyone would like to meet the new you. There are showers through that door there, and clothes have been sat out for you. Take your time and make your way up top. We will be waiting," he told them, and they both gave him a nod as he walked away laughing. He remembered his early mating days with his own mate, but he didn't think their lust for each other would ever settle down. When they finally emerged an hour later clean and dressed, Michael and Bella made their way back towards the throne room where everyone was waiting. Michael gave a side warning glare to any male that looked at Bella too long for his liking, and Aro and the other two kings chuckled. If he was possessive as a human, it was 10 times worse as a vampire. "How do you both feel?" Aro asked them. "Really good," Bella told him, and he nodded, holding out his hand. "I'd like to see if your mind is still as silent," he asked, looking to Michael, who nodded when Bella nodded her agreement. Aro touched her hand and huffed. "Still just as silent," he said, and Bella beamed. She was glad that would never change. "Maybe Jane should try," Keys said, and the moment Jane turned her eyes on Bella and Michael, a bubble burst out of Bella and surrounded her and Michael. Everyone gasped in shock as Aro walked around to examine. "This is amazing. I wondered if you'd be gifted," he told her when her shield dropped once she relaxed when Jane backed off. It seemed both Michael and Bella had impeccable control right from the start, to which they were both glad. Bella spent time with Dimitri working on her gift as Michael watched like a hawk from the sidelines before training as well on combat fighting. His strength was beyond that of even a newborn, and Aro had a feeling it would never win. He was without a doubt the strongest vampire around and took to fighting easily. He managed to remove more parts than they could count from the others training him, and Bella seemed to feed of his violence just as much as he feed of her mere presence. They could never be apart, that much was clear, and Aro pitied the poor soul that would try to part them one day. He'd meet the devil himself at the hands of Michael. Bella loved being a vampire. She knew she would back when she begged Edward to change her, but now she didn't need him, and she was a kick-ass vampire with Michael at her side. They would be unstoppable with a bond no one could fathom, and she knew Michael loved being a vampire as well. He still liked to wear his mask a lot, and Bella was fine with that. It was part of him, and she loved everything about him. But when they fed, he'd keep it off, and enjoyed the feed and kill more so than he did before, and Bella loved egging him on it, helping him make the kills more viscous than the last. She fed his dark desire, and he in turn fed hers. Life with Bella and Michael was a change for the Volturi for sure. They got on well with most everyone, minus Michael ripping the head off any unmated male that flirted with Bella. It only took a few deaths before all male vampires in the area got the message, and Bella just smirked and egged it on. It was clear to Keys she loved Michael's possessive side and made it a game to see if she could get a male to succumb to her smile and make a pass, and Michael took great pleasure in letting that male know who the fuck was boss. They also couldn't feed with the others in the guard. They tried that once, but it was clear Michael and Bella's thirst for violence was better left for them in private, so their meals were brought to the same room they had been their first time, and they were left to do whatever they wanted. They also needed to feed more than normal vampires. Their bloodlust was so strong it had to be fed every day, and Aro wasn't sure if that would wane as they aged or not, but he now could see why them living alone in the middle of nowhere would be a good idea. It was hard to continue to feed their diet on a daily basis. They did it because he wanted them to stay with them for now, but as years went on it would become very suspicious and harder to hide, but so far he was thrilled with the creations Keys created in Bella and Michael. 3 months into their change, Bella has mastered her shield, and Dimitri's tutelage had helped a lot. She was able to really see what it could do, and everyone had been impressed. Michael hadn't shown any extra gifts other than his extreme strength and ability to scare even the oldest vampires with just one look, and Aro often wondered if fear was his gift, but that was so hard to determine if it was a gift or just him alone. "So, when are we going for the Cullens?" Bella asked one day as she was sitting in the entertainment room with Michael wearing his mask was laying with his head in her lap as she read to him. She paused and turned towards Keys, who was playing pool with Dimitri, and asked her question. He paused and glanced over at her bright red eyes and smirked. "You know. Let me talk with Aro on that. If you think you're ready, we can begin to plan," he said, and she nodded with a smile lighting her red lips as she glanced back down towards Michael, who chuckled and reached up to run his finger down her cheek as he nodded. Yes, it was time to end that little back of her past, and he was ready to wrap his hands around that prick's neck. It took around a day for Aro to decide he too was ready for that to end. The longer they were out there exposing themselves to humans, the more danger they put their race in, and Aro was tired of cleaning up their messes, so he gathered his elite guard and started to plan. While they planned, Bella and Michael decided to have a little fun. "Catch me if you can," she whispered seductively in his ear before darting from the room. Chuckling, he slid on his mask and started tracking his mate. He did so enjoy their games. Dmitri rolled his eyes as Bella ran past him, chuckling as she jumped up into the rafters and tried to hide. He decided he didn't want anything to do with whatever she was doing, but when he saw Michael stalk past in his pasty white mask, he knew they were playing some sort of twisted foreplay. He knew he wanted to be on the other side of the castle when Michael found her. It wasn't hard for Michael to locate Bella. When her scent was by far the strongest he'd ever smelled, and their mating bond would always lead him directly to her, but he let her run and drawled it out because he too was enjoying himself. It turned him on like nothing else when Bella indulged him and allowed him to hunt and let loose, and when he decided he was turned on too far to continue, he snatched her out of the air and slammed her into the wall of the basements where he had located her. "You found me?" she panted as she stared into his now black eyes, and he smirked, yanking off his mask and kissing her neck. "Yes, my little mate. I got you now." He purred and she moaned as he ripped off her clothes, and she did the same to his, and he laid her on the stone table in the room and to her hard and fast, just the way they both liked it. "Now that we're all here." Keyes chuckled as they had to fetch Bella and Michael from the sub-levels and drag them to the throne room for a meeting, and he couldn't keep the smirk off his face as Bella sat there in Michael's shirt because he had ripped all her clothes in their little game. Yes, we're here," Bella said, sitting on the steps of the throne room with Michael sitting behind her as she waited for them to tell her why they had been so rudely interrupted, causing Felix to lose his hand for a moment thanks to Michael's reaction. "I, along with Marcus and Keyes, will accompany you and your mate along with our elite guard to take care of the Cullens once and for all," Aro told her, and she clapped happily with a big smile on her face. She couldn't wait. "We will also check in and deal with Eleazar and his group, because I know damn well they knew what Carlisle was up to and didn't report it as he should have," Aro continued, and Bella nodded. "We leave at sundown. Think you can be ready by then?" Keyes smirked as he asked Bella, who just flipped him the bird as she pulled Michael from the room so they could change. Keyes laughed. She was the best vampire he'd ever changed. Aro made sure Michael and Bella were well fed and sated for their long flight. He didn't need them going at it on board and killing them all in a fireplane crash. He watched as Michael sat on one of the coaches on the plane in his mask with Bella's head in his lap. He played with her hair as she read from a book the entire way to Alaska. It was heating to see how much they loved each other. How gentle the scary as hell Michael Myers was with Bella alone. Those hands he'd seen rip apart vampires and humans with glee caressed Bella's hair with a loving embrace. It was a dynamic he hadn't ever seen in newborns before. When they landed, Bella was damn near bouncing on her toes. She was so freaking excited she couldn't sit still, and Michael was no help at all. He just smiled lovingly at her and allowed her to bounce around as she awaited Aro's orders. "Can you keep your shield up long enough for us to get there so they cannot see or hear us coming?" Aro asked her, and she scoffed but nodded as she cloaked them all in her shield. They then ran towards where they knew the Cullens' large log cabin was located, deep into the woods. All three brothers chuckled when Aro knocked on the door, and they could hear all the Cullens jump in shock at being spooked. Bella stood behind the three brothers with Michael plastered at her back with his mask firmly in place. He would be parted from her in the face of possible danger, and Bella took comfort in his touch. The brothers planned to keep her hidden under her cloak until they wanted her to be reviled. When the door opened, Carlisle's shocked face at seeing not only Aro, Marcus and Keyes but the guard as well, a tall scary man standing behind them in a mask. If his heart still beat, it would have been rapidly thumping in his chest. He actually felt concerned. Opening his mouth to ask what was going on, Keyes snorted and shoved the door open. "Shut the fuck up, Carlisle, no one is in the mood for your rambling. Move so we may enter," he hissed as the remaining Cullens filed inside the large living room. Carlisle nodded and fled towards his mate to stand in front of her as the Volturi filed in, slammed the door shut. Aro stepped forward and Marcus and Keyes moved close together to shield Bella, still as Aro paced back and forth in front of everyone as if he were in deep thought. My disappointment continues to mount in you, Carlisle. The fact I have to come all the way out here away from my own mate really pissed me off, my old friend," he said, turning to stare Carlisle down. Edward and Alice had an extremely confused look on their face, and Bella chuckled as she glanced at them. She knew it was her shield stopping them from being able to get an upper hand, and it made her elation at this whole ordeal even higher. "I don't understand what it is you think we've done, Aro?" Carlisle said, and Aro snorted and rolled his eyes. "It really must be the animal diet that makes your family so stupid and slow. Did you or did you not allow your first sired son date a human female, wherein you exposed not only our race to her but did not turn her as our law states?" Aro asked, and the Cullens gasped in shock. "I told you." Rosalie sneered from behind Emmett, where they were standing off to the side with Jasper. "Not now, Rose." Alice hissed, and Rose rolled her golden eyes. "Why not? It's apparent we're going to be punished for Edward's mistake. I told you not to bring a human into our life, and when you insisted on doing so, I told you it would bite you in the fucking ass." Rose hissed, and Edward growled at her, but Emmett's growl back stopped Edward from doing anything else. "They don't have any proof," Edward said, and Aro chuckled as he motioned for his brothers to move. "Oh, but I do, child," Aro said as Keys and Marcus parted, and Bella looked up with her bright red eyes and dropped her hood. Michael's arm wrapped firmly around her waist as she moved to stand next to her sire and smirked so freaking wide at the Cullens' shocked faces. "Well, hello, my old betraying family. How have you been?" she said, and Edward fell to his knees in despair. "Not my Bella, no love," he cried out, and Michael's warning growl made Bella chuckle. "I'd watch what you say around my mate, Edward. He's a little possessive," she said, patting Michael's hand to stop his low growl. "Bella, what happened to you?" Alice asked, stepping forward, but Bella's shield slammed into her and sent her backwards, and they all stared at Bella with shocked eyes now. "Oh well, let's see. The family I loved betrayed me. Edward told me how I was nothing but a toy to your family and that I wasn't good enough to be a Cullen. Then Charlie had me committed when I lost my fucking mind. I met Michael while at the sanitarium but lost Charlie thanks to Victoria and Mike Newton, but I got my revenge on them already. Now we've been offered a sweet deal by the Volturi, and Keys here is our maker, and I'm here to make sure you reap what you sow in a big fucking way," she said in a cold and heartless voice, and the Cullens realized their sweet human Bella was long dead. "Oh, Bella. None of this was supposed to happen," Edward said, and Bella snorted and shared an "are you serious" look with Keys, who just chuckled. "I really live how you think you had or still have any say in how my life or lack thereof should have turned out. You were not my father and had no fucking right to make those choices for me. I wanted to be turned, and it wasn't your place to stop it," Bella hissed, and Edward still looked so upset. "And to go so far as to suck the venom out? That's a major lawbreaker there, young Edward," Marcus said from Bella's other side, and Edward winced at what he knew that meant. He was in serious shit. "Bella, I can't believe you told the Volturi on us. We loved you," Alice said, and Jasper snorted in disbelief from Emmett's side, and Alice shot him a glare. "You have a fucked up way of showing it, midget," Bella said, and Alice growled in anger but reared back in fear when Michael's growl sounded louder than hers ever could. He really did strike fear in anyone. "What are you planning to do with us, Aro?" Carlisle asked, and Aro smirked. I haven't yet decided on all of you. I know what Bella and her mate would like to do with some of you, and I'm inclined to grant her request, but for the rest of you I'm still contemplating. But don't worry. You will know soon enough. Bella, if you'd please," Aro said, moving back as Bella and Michael moved forward, eyes zeroed in on Edward and a smirk lighting Bella's face as she slid the rope off and handed it to Dimitri while rubbing her hands together. "Oh, this will be fun," she said, and Michael nodded in agreement as his eyes narrowed on his mate's past boyfriend. He couldn't wait to hurt his hands on his prick. To say vampires cannot fear was something Edward thought to be true his entire existence. That was until today, as he stared into the eyes of a clearly deranged male 3 times his size with Bella as the ringleader smirking. He never thought his sweet perfect Bella would ever have turned out to be this sadistic, but as he glanced at her with a pleading look he saw nothing but darkness within her eyes, and Edward felt fear course through his body, and he did the only thing he could think of at that moment. He ran. Seriously? Bella snorted and rolled her eyes. All right then. She said and nodded to Michael as they watched Edward tear the back door off the hinges to escape, and Michael and Bella shot forward in chase. Jane and the others stopped Carlisle and Alice from following as Jane hit them with her gift to keep them in the house as they allowed Bella and Edward their fun. Aro chuckled as he and his brothers made themselves comfortable on the couches because they knew there was a good chance it might be a while. Oh, Edward? You can't run from us. Bella taunted as they stopped and listened for the sounds he was making jumping through the trees. Bella chuckled at how much of a whiny child he was being instead of taking his punishment like a man. Let's end this. She told Michael, who nodded as he leapt into the air just as Edward came sailing through the trees to try and escape. Michael collided with the immortal man-child, gripped him by the neck and slammed him into the ground so hard they left a huge hole in their wake. Bella chuckled as she walked over towards the hole and looked down at Edward struggling to free himself from Michael's hold. You should probably save your strength, Edward. You're going to need it. Bella said as Michael climbed out of the big hold with Edward's neck still tightly wrapped in his grip. Bella, please. Please don't do this. I still love you? I lied to you when we left. He gasped out and Michael growled, but Bella rolled her red eyes. How little I care now. Edward is almost non-existent. You didn't listen to my begging when you left me alone in the forest and said all that shit to me. I could care less what your reasoning was and how you feel now. All I care about is watching you die, painfully. She said as she waved Michael to follow, and he did without question until they were back in the backyard of the Cullen home. Michael tossed Edward on the ground as he and Bella stood in front of him and watched as he sat back on his knees and opened his mouth to talk again, but Michael's boot to the mouth made his face crack and he cried out in pain. Bella saw the Cullens and the Volturi watching with mixed emotions, and she gave them a little wave. The Volturi just chuckled as they watched, knowing just how sadistic these two could be, and they knew the Cullens were about to get a shock at the new Bella. Edward, let me tell you a little something. She said, bending down and lacing her fingers together as she stared down at him. You're not going to survive this, and it will be the most pain you've ever felt. Michael is an artist when it comes to killing something he enjoyed even as a human, and I love to help bring that passion out of him. She pursed, tossing Michael a wink. My man's going to fuck you up, and I'm going to, laughed as you beg for your life like the pathetic piece of shit that you are. Then I'll move up to my next target. She sneered before nodding to Michael, who instantly stomped Edward's face again. Bella, stop please. She heard scream from the house by Carlisle, but she just flipped them the bird over her shoulder, never taking her eyes off Michael. She walked around them in a circle with an intense look of concentration on her face as Michael hit, kicked and used his nails and teeth to slice into Edward. Every scream Edward let out, every plea, she just smirked even wider as her lust spiked and her admiration for Michael grew, knowing she was truly mated to the most dangerous man on the planet now. Jasper watched from inside, standing alongside Rose and Emmett with their mouths open in shock. He could feel what Bella and Michael were feeling, and it was nothing like he'd ever felt before. Bella was the ringleader and Michael was the most dangerous vampire he'd ever seen, and together they made a scary and unstoppable team. Looking at his ex-wife and the coven leader of the Cullens clan, he knew if they could be sick they would have, but he also knew he sure as hell did not want to face Bella and her mate, not for anyone, so he decided then and there to pick the winning side and go back to the Jasper he truly wanted to be. Scary, isn't it? Glad they're on our side. He heard and turned to see Jane standing next to him. He had never seen her up close, and though she was young she was very beautiful, and Jasper smirked and nodded. It's defiantly not anything I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of shit in my day. Jasper told her, and ignored Alice's low growl in the background. She had no claim on him anymore. Well, maybe Aro will let you live and you can get to know the new Bella. She's actually pretty amusing, Jane said with a smirk before walking back over towards her brother. Jasper watched her go and chuckled. Yeah, hopefully he'd be allowed to live and get to know the new Bella and the little blonde Spitfire. Please, Aro. You have to stop this. Carlisle pleaded, and Aro just rolled his eyes as they all watched as Edward's hand went flying along with a chunk of his chest as Michael played with his victim. Honestly, Carlisle, I don't remember you being this much of a whiny bitch. Must be the animal diet. I granted Bella and Michael the freedom to do what they wanted to young Edward. He really brought this on himself. You know what they say about women scorned. Aro chuckled as Carlisle shook his head and turned away from the scene, completely helpless, with his mate crying into his chest as they tried to block out Edward's cries. Finally, after what seemed like forever, the cries stopped as they watched Bella and Michael rip Edward's head off and toss it into the first Bella had lit, along with what was left of him. They shared a very heated kiss over his burning ashes, and Alice lost it. "You bitch!" she screamed as she broke through the glass door before anyone could stop them. Bella laughed as she pulled away from Michael and waved Jane off, who had been about to stop Alice, as Alice ran full tilt towards the pair. "Oh please, bitch. Show me what you got." Bella taunted as she pushed away from Michael and met Alice in the air, slamming her to the ground. "Michael's not the only one of us that enjoys a good kill." Bella smirked as she and Alice started fighting. Michael stayed on the side watching carefully, but he knew Bella was more than capable of taking care of this little pest. Bella hadn't planned to kill Alice, but now she was going to allow her to join Edward once she was done with her. "Well, that's two down in the Cullen Coven. Anyone else want to join them?" Bella called out as she backflipped over Alice and ripped her head off with ease, tossing it into the fire, and Michael tossed the rest of her body with it before they made their way back towards the house. Jasper, Rose and Emmett shook their heads no quickly and stepped to the side, leaving Carlisle and Esme alone in front of Aro. "Just kill us and be done with it, Aro," Carlisle said, and Bella snorted as she stepped back inside. "How far the mighty have fallen. Take it like a man, asshole. You lost control of your coven long ago, and it's time to pay the piper," Bella said as she walked by. Keyes chuckled as Bella and Michael flopped into a chair as if they didn't just rip apart two vampires, and waited for Aro to speak. "Death would be too easy for you, old friend. It's time you learned your place. You and the remaining members of your family will return to Volturi with us. You will be placed in a cell until you drink human blood or until we force feed it down your throat, and then you will be put on the guard under Dimitri, and you will live as every other vampire does. If you try to go against this order, you will watch as Bella and Michael tear apart your mate. I will not give you any more leadway," Aro ordered. Emmett, Jasper and Rose nodded instantly. Carlisle sighed, but the scared look on Esme's face when Bella winked at her made him agree. He'd do whatever he needed to keep her safe. "Excellent. Now we must stop to visit Eliezer, and then home we go, everyone," Aro said as the Volturi nodded in agreement as the Cullens moved to pack some things. Bella smirked as she gazed out at the burning embers of Edward and Alice and chuckled. That door was finally closed. Bella chuckled as the Denali clan filed out of the house, golden eyes wide with worry. Bella ran her eyes over them all, where she stood with Michael's arm around her waist. Aro spoke to the vampire that apparently used to live with them and had a gift to tell if someone would be gifted, but now lived in exile with his mate. Aro told them of the Cullens' punishment and ruling and laid the hammer down on them for not reporting the break-in laws to the Volturi when they knew what was going on. Eliezer nodded in submission that he was to be on call from now on. If at any time the Volturi had need for his skills, he was to come immediately, if they would all be punished for their misdeeds. Bella snickered at the grief-stricken look on Tanya's face when she heard Edward had been killed for his crimes, and her eyes shot over to glare at Bella before taking a step back at the growl from Michael. You killed Edward?" Tanya asked, ignoring her sister's whispered words to hush, and Bella laughed and nodded. "We did, yes. He deserved it," she purred, and Michael gave a nod, black eyes narrowing behind his mask. Eliezer took one look at Michael and Bella and instantly hushed any more words Tanya may have had. Tanya looked at him but nodded and didn't say any more. "Good choice to lease the pets, Eliezer, unless of course you'd like to join dear Edward in the afterlife, Blondie?" Bella asked, and Tanya just shook her head no and stepped behind Eliezer. Bella shared an amused smile with Jane and Dimitri. Once Aro was satisfied the Alaskan clan was scared enough to never break the rules again, they headed home with the remaining Cullens to start their punishment. The ride home was quiet. The Cullens didn't really say much other than Jasper and Jane talking some. Bella and Michael sat as always together, with Bella reading to him and Michael resting with his head in her lap, his mask off and eyes closed. When they returned to Volturi, the Cullens were taken to the dungeons as promised. Jasper drank immediately and was released into Dimitri's service, and didn't seem to mind. Emmett and Rose followed not long after, not wanting to be left in the cell any longer. Carlisle and Esme held out for a week until Keyes came down and threatened them. Whatever he said made them drink pretty quickly, and they reluctantly resigned themselves to their new life. A month after the Cullens were brought to Volturi, things had settled back down. Jasper and Jane had been caught having sex in the game room, and after Alec almost killed him, it was revealed by Marcus they were true mates, and Jasper was given a spot in the immediate guard. Emmett and Felix actually got along really well, and Rose found a shopping partner in Heidi and was actually enjoying their new life. Carlisle and Esme still sulked and pouted, but Bella really could care less if they enjoyed their new lot in life or not. Things got a little crazy one day when Bella was running through the halls from Michael playing one of their normal games when she was slammed into the stone wall hard, causing her to go through the wall and slide across the ground. Pissed now, Bella stood and dropped into a crouch and growled at the two smirking vampires. They were very pale, one bleached blonde and another dark hair, and they both looked extra creepy. Big fucking mistake, Bella told them, but they just chuckled. Bella could feel Michael on his way, and it appeared he wasn't alone. "Oh, I think we've hit the jackpot. Little newborn alone and defenseless. The Volturi will surely hate to lose one as succulent as you." They spoke in a heavy accent, and Bella narrowed her now black eyes. Before Bella could blink, the blonde one was behind her with his hand to her throat as Michael's growl came down the hall as he slid to the stop near them, face mask in place with Jasper and Dimitri as his side, all growling loudly as the dark-haired stranger tissed but took a step back in fear at seeing Michael. "Wouldn't want the little defenseless newborn to be hurt now, do you?" He purred, and Michael hissed, "Vladimir and Stefan, you are making a big mistake." Jasper told them, and Bella knew from her time with the Cullens that the Russian vampires used to rule until the Volturi took over, and these are the two Russian rulers that have been a thorn in the Volturi's side for many, many years. Bella really didn't give a shit who they were dead men now anyways. "No, I think we'll be taking the newborn with us until the Volturi surrender. We will have our rule back." The blonde hissed, and Bella snorted before locking eyes with Michael and giving him a nod. They didn't need words anymore. They knew each other's thoughts with a mere look. "Actually, you're not. You're going to die," Bella said, flipping backwards until she was behind the blonde before drop-kicking him into Michael. The rest of the Volturi, including the rest of the Cullens, came then as the alarms had been set, and they watched as Bella and Michael went toe-to-toe with the two oldest vampires around. They had no idea how dangerous these two vampires were, but they knew they messed up the moment Michael ripped their heads off violently and lit the rest of them on fire before wrapping Bella into his arms and running them to their rooms before anyone could say anything. It was 3 days before they came out with their bags packed. "I think it's time Michael and I found our cabin in the woods and got back to what Michael enjoys doing. We've had fun here and we'll come for visits, and if you need us, but that attack just proves it's best if we stay alone for a while," Bella told them, and the three vampire kings couldn't say anything against that. No way in hell would they get on these two's bad side, not after seeing what they can do, so they just nodded and handed them the keys to the cabin deep in the woods they purchased for them for when this time came. Bella took it with a nod of thanks and with a few hugs to the people Bella and Michael actually liked. They left to live life on their own, and every time they heard a news reports of a town with a serial killer on the loose, they knew Michael and Bella was enjoying their immortality, and the Volturi was just glad they didn't want to rule, because there was no way they'd be able to take those two out. They wouldn't even dare to try it. Michael Myers and Bella Swan was the epitome of evil walking the earth, and anyone that got in their way would feel their wrath. The end.